Chapter 533. 10 minutes later. Shunning City. Northern Frontier Prince's Mansion. Li Zhong was flipping through a piece of paper that didn't have many words written on it. He gritted his teeth and felt a buzzing sound in his head. Because of the two outstanding Secret Service organizations, the Embroidered Uniform Guards and the Association of the Demon Emperor, although the flames of war had ignited in the entire Northern Territory, it didn't affect the efficiency of receiving intelligence from the rear at all. From the moment Zhang Xiuzhu wanted to arm wrestle with Shen Lin Jun's reserve, every move on the field didn't escape Li Zhong's eyes. But intelligence was intelligence. The letter in Li Zhong's hand was personally delivered by Zhang Xiuzhu. The content was very simple and very bold. Because Zhang Xiuzhu wanted to establish the third Secret Service organization in the Northern Frontier, the Military Intelligence Division, whose full name was the Military Intelligence Analysis Division. The Embroidered Uniform Guards had a very special position in the Northern Frontier. Because other than Luo Su, all the members of the Embroidered Uniform Guards were from the Association of the Demon Emperor. They were a secret service organization that was trained by Lin Yuan himself. Since they officially left the Association of the Demon Emperor, they carried the halo of personally appointed by the Dragon King. So in the eyes of the local government, they were an existence that had to be opened wide. Even the lowest level of Embroidered Uniform Guard Secret Service agent had to be respectful to the local government. Because disrespecting them was equivalent to disrespecting the Dragon King. But not everyone would give face to the Embroidered Uniform Guards. For example, some of the Demon Emperor's guild with similar authority didn't like the Embroidered Uniform Guards. After all, the members of the Embroidered Uniform Guards were all from the Association of the Demon Emperor. Many of the Baihu and Qianhu, who had real power in the Association of the Demon Emperor, were at the same level as the younger brothers. They had to smile and call everyone Big Brother when they saw them. With the sudden rise of the Embroidered Uniform Guards, these younger brothers also became important figures in the Northern Frontier. This made the Demon Emperor's guild feel like their rice bowl was stolen. This was the reason why the two sides didn't deal with each other from the beginning. Furthermore, the stronger the Embroidered Uniform Guards were, the weaker the Shifter Emperor's Assembly's method of obtaining information would be. In the later stages, the Shifter Emperor's Assembly would no longer have anything to do with the Shifter Emperor's Assembly. Therefore, whether it was for power or profit, the Association of Shifter Emperors and the Embroidered Uniform Guards were like fire and water. The Embroidered Uniform Guards had a halo, but so did the Shifter Emperors Association. After all, it was a faction personally supported by Lin Yuan. The Shifter Emperors Association had quite a bit of influence in the entire Northern Frontier. Even the local tyrants in the gray areas had to depend on the Shifter Emperors Association if they wanted to earn some money. It wasn't difficult for the local government to do something well, but to do it efficiently, they had to use the influence of these local tyrants. After all, in the special appointment system of officials in the Northern Frontier, there had always been flowing officials and officials made of iron. These officials with salaries and ranks were far inferior to the local government. If they weren't the local tyrants, they were the local tyrants' protection. Most of the time, they had more influence in the local government than their official counterparts. This was because they represented the Shifter Emperors Association. This was an unavoidable situation. After all, the term of an official wasn't long. It was obviously unrealistic to expect a new group of officials to govern the local government in an orderly manner from scratch. They could only rely on the officials to wisely manage their relationships with the local officials. Only by cooperating with both sides could the local government unleash the greatest power of the local government. Therefore, the Shifter Emperors Association, which wasn't considered an official faction, had the right to speak in the local government. This was why they had the confidence to compete with the Embroidered Uniform Guards to see who was the leader of the Northern Frontier Special Forces. In name, the Embroidered Uniform Guards could trample on the Shifter Emperors Association. However, if the two sides completely fell out, the Shifter Emperors Association could instantly shut down most of the Embroidered Uniform Guards offices in the Northern Frontier. However, the Embroidered Uniform Guards and the Northern Frontier's royal residents would have to settle the bloody accounts afterwards. However, whether it was the Embroidered Uniform Guards or the Shifter Emperors Association, they obviously had nothing to do with the military system. Although according to the rules, the Embroidered Uniform Guards could fill in the positions of the military officers. However, at the level of the Embroidered Uniform Guards, they could easily get rich. If there were vacancies in the positions of the military officers who hadn't reached a certain level, the Embroidered Uniform Guards wouldn't easily use their privileges. After all, Yu Dingchen was an exception. After all, being given priority to fill in the positions and having to fill in the positions were two different things. The privileges of the embroidered uniform guards only allowed them to compare with officers from ordinary backgrounds when they were promoted. If both of them had similar abilities and could adapt to the position, the embroidered uniform guards could directly take up the position. However, if they used their privileges, it would be equivalent to leaving the embroidered uniform guards. If they still continued to be associated with the embroidered uniform guards, Lin Yuan and Li Zhong wouldn't let them off easily. It would also temporarily cut off the chance for the embroidered uniform guards to gradually control the entire military officer system. Of course, although the two spy agencies weren't related to the military system, the military still had to accept the supervision of these two agencies when they didn't have their own spy forces. Furthermore, because they weren't on the same side, no one would be nice to the military officers. Therefore, the military had always hoped to form their own spy forces. However, other than Zhang Xiuzhu, who wasn't well known in the northern frontier, no military officer dared to suggest that the military establish their own intelligence agency because it was a taboo. After all, the military was the strongest force of a force. If such a department was allowed to supervise itself, it would only allow the military officers' power to expand infinitely. Sooner or later, there would be rebellions and rebellions. In addition, Luo Su and Sherdong were already badly beaten for power. The cake that they had now was not enough to eat. How could they allow a third spy agency to rise and take over the military system that they coveted but couldn't get their hands on? If such a thing really happened, Luo Su and Sherdong's first reaction would definitely not be to ignore the growth of this hidden danger. These two spy chiefs would immediately join hands to strangle the third party that was a threat to them in the cradle. They wouldn't leave a single chance. However, a triangle was always the most stable shape. Once the military intelligence agency was established, it would undoubtedly be the most suitable for Lin Yuan's main theme of checks and balances. Moreover, it would also free up a lot of manpower, so that the entire northern frontier wouldn't feel stretched for information transmission. Looking at the current embroidered uniform guards, because of this war, the only people who didn't have a mission in the whole shunning city were the typical scapegoats. The rest of the members were all running around day and night in the northern battlefield, trying to avoid contact with the enemy as much as possible. The previous Qianhu, Yu Dingchen, was from such a background. Except for these guys that even the embroidered uniform guards themselves didn't like, Li Zhong had to make an appointment in advance if he wanted to call two embroidered uniform guards to do something. Although it seemed that he knew the situation of the war like the back of his hand, only Li Zhong himself knew the pain. Without the supervision of the Association of the Demon Emperor and the embroidered uniform guards, the originally peaceful northern frontier was now a mess. If Lin Yuan and Boss Lin weren't in Shunning City, perhaps even the northern frontier would be in chaos. Chapter 534. It's a good idea, but it's a pity that it's too ambitious. Lin Yuan, who already knew the contents of the letter, sighed faintly and smiled. Actually, according to the original rhythm, Luo Su and Sherdong would definitely have a big battle. At that time, even a big shot like you wouldn't be able to avoid it, let alone other forces. The army wants to establish their own spy agency, not to seize power, but more to protect themselves. If it wasn't for this sudden war, Luo Su and Sherdong would already be like fire and water. Almost every day, there would be members of the other party's faction who would fall from grace. However, every crime was irrefutable, causing those who hadn't yet chosen a side to be in a state of panic. According to this rhythm, when the chess pieces in the hands of the big shots on both sides were used up, they would use the evidence in their hands to force the neutral party to choose a side. However, speaking of which, they were all top spy agencies in the northern frontier. How could the embroidered uniform guard not have what the Shifter Emperor Association had? The operation of choosing a side before being imprisoned was a common occurrence in the northern frontier. Actually, I think that Zhang Xiuzhu's idea is not bad. After all, the war has used too much power from the Shifter Emperor Association and the embroidered uniform guard. Now, we have even lost control of our own base. If it wasn't for Zhang Xiu's old subordinates supporting us, I don't know how many forces would have taken this opportunity to meddle in the northern frontier. However, if this continues, the situation will still go out of control. Therefore, I think that instead of letting the Shifter Emperor Association and the embroidered uniform guard continue to fight like this, it would be better to cultivate a third party. Firstly, it would free up some of the spy forces to return to the northern frontier. Secondly, it would also tell Luo Su and Sherdong that they can fight, but if they go overboard, the one who laughs in the end might not necessarily be one of them. However, Zhang Xiuzhu may have the ability, but his temperament is too bad. Now, he wants to prove himself too much and has even forgotten what it means to be unworthy of a position. If the Dragon King doesn't punish him, he will cause great trouble sooner or later. Li Zhong rubbed his chin and said solemnly, "Therefore, I believe that even if we want to nurture a third party, this power should not fall into the hands of Zhang Xiuzhu." According to what Lin Yuan had said in his previous life, Li Zhong should be a Virgo. He strives for perfection in everything and cannot tolerate the slightest flaw. Li Zhong had planned the battle plan against the entire Shuangjian dynasty a long time ago, and it had been carried out smoothly until the appearance of Zhang Xiuzhu. Although the results did not affect the plan at all, and even achieved a better result, Li Zhong could only say that it was due to luck. It could not be repeated again. If Zhang Xiuzhu's sudden change continued to happen, Li Zhong would be suspicious of all his plans. If Li Zhong had been the one to monopolize the power of this kind of unstable element, he would have definitely killed him. However, he did not have the final say in the northern frontier. He could only put forward his own opinions and wait for Lin Yuan's decision. "I'm very curious. What makes you think that the military system does not have its own spy agency?" Lin Yuan's eyes narrowed slightly as he said coldly, "No matter when, the military is this king's most powerful fist to the outside world. The weapons in their hands will never be pointed at their own people. What *T military intelligence department? There is no need for it to exist. In the end, the original intention of this force was to deal with their own people. Zhang Xiuzhu also saw that you wanted a third party to appear, and that I would not make a move against him before I squeezed out all his value. He grasped this mentality and wanted to become an influential official in the northern frontier. Yes, the Dragon King is wise." Li Zhong trembled as he lowered his head, his face full of resentment. Zhang Xiuzhu's ambition was indeed a little inflated. To put it nicely, he was arrogant because of his talent. It was as if the northern frontier could not move without him. Therefore, no matter who it was, he could make changes at the last minute. All of his actions were to make himself famous and then become an influential figure in the northern frontier. He could even stand shoulder to shoulder with first-rate existences like Li Zhongxing, Zhang Qilin, and Gao Buzhen. However, his little calculations naturally could not escape the eyes of Lin Yuan and Li Zhong. After all, he was a student who had just graduated not long ago. No matter how intelligent he was only an armchair strategist. Compared to existences like Li Zhong and Lin Yuan who had experienced great storms and waves, he was not just a little bit different. However, on this matter, Zhang Xiuzhu grasped Li Zhong's mentality perfectly. Because Li Zhong really did want to set up a third-party spy organization to check and balance Sherdong and Luo Su, he would also have the intention to kill Zhang Xiuzhu, this ambitious existence. Whether it was Li Zhongxing who admired him or Lin Yuan who made the best use of him, neither of them would watch Li Zhong extinguish this future general. This feeling of being calculated inexplicably made Li Zhong feel annoyed. After a while, he suddenly raised his head and stared at Lin Yuan with his eyes wide open. The military system had its own spy organization. Why did he, the king of the northern frontier, not know about it at all? Do you want to ask why there is a third spy organization in the northern frontier? Why did no one, including you, know about it? Lin Yuan grinned and said, "Luo Su knows. Don't look at how fiercely he and Sherdong fight. Unlike Sherdong, any of his actions have no disadvantages for the northern frontier. This is because he knows very well that fighting to the death with Sherdong will not bring him any benefits. The crazier Sherdong's actions are, the more stable the position of the Embroidered Uniform Guard will be. After all, the first batch of members of the Embroidered Uniform Guard and the third spy organization were personally trained by this king, so they can be considered students of the same generation. The Embroidered Uniform Guard was an organization that Lin Yuan had created by imitating the Great Ming Empire's Embroidered Uniform Guard in his previous life. Everyone knew of the Embroidered Uniform Guard's fame, but they did not know that the Great Ming Empire had another force set up outside Liaodong Pass that made countless Mongolian tribes tremble in fear. Yi Bus Ho. This external scouting force was similar to the scouts that Lin Yuan knew of in his previous life. The requirements were very simple but also very difficult. Those who could go deep into the camp and scout could join Yi Bushu's team. It was said that at Yi Bushu's peak, They could even clearly investigate who the Mongolian Khans met in the camp and what they said. Then, the next day, a document would be sent to the emperor's desk. This special force that had outstanding military achievements in history but few people knew about was set up at the same time as the Embroidered Uniform Guard. Yi Bus-ho was not a member of the Embroidered Uniform Guard. Although they were not as famous as the former, Yi Bus-ho was not any worse than the Embroidered Uniform Guard at its peak. Since Lin Yuan had set up the Embroidered Uniform Guard, how could he forget about Yi Bus-ho? So from the beginning, Lin Yuan did not mind Sherdong fighting with Luo Su. Because in this kind of situation, a person's ambition would be completely exposed. And with Yi Bushu's existence, the two sides would never reach the point of fighting to the death. Chapter 535. Yi Balan, what do you think of Zhang Xiuzhu? Lin Yuan suddenly opened his mouth and said something that made Li Zhong puzzled. Li Zhong's cultivation method was called Heaven's Sun Gazing at Aura, which was personally taught to him by Lin Yuan. The biggest difference with most of the cultivation methods in the world was that the limit of this cultivation method was not the void realm, but the cultivation conditions were more special. To cultivate this technique, one must have their own territory. Furthermore, one's cultivation base was tied to the prosperity of the territory. Li Zhong had no doubt that if the northern region became the only empire that unified the 7 empires, and he was able to govern the entire northern region in an orderly manner, then the cultivation base that the territory would give him would directly push him to a magical realm that he could not even imagine. However, the cultivator of this cultivation method could not be extraordinary, because all his cultivation was fake. For example, if the northern frontier unified the 7 dynasties, but all the creatures under his rule died, his cultivation would instantly fall to the level of an ordinary person. Even if there was a natural disaster or man-made disaster somewhere, he would be seriously injured and his cultivation would fall. Now the northern frontier had taken over the whole northern territory, and Li Zhong's cultivation had broken through the threshold of the Heaven Gang realm. Although he had not fought with others, but based on the feeling that the strong people in the northern frontier brought to him, all the cultivators who were weaker than Wine Sword Mystery could not bring any threat to him. After all, Wine Sword Mystery was at the peak of the Heaven Gang realm, and he had killed the existence of the late stage of Heaven Gang realm. In addition to the particularity of this cultivation method, Li Zhong's perception of the environment was extremely sharp. Even Luo Su and Sherdong, who were the heads of the secret service who specialized in the cultivation method given by Lin Yuan, could not hide under his eyes. At present, the only one who could do this was the abandoned disciple of the Voidwalker, Xia Siyu. With the talent of shadow affinity, he could blend into the shadow at any time to avoid Li Zhong's perception. He is a good seedling. All of a sudden, an unfamiliar voice sounded. Immediately, a sloppy man wearing black leather armor with long hair like withered grass that covered half of his face slowly appeared in front of Li Zhong. He bowed to Lin Yuan and continued, "Such a person should not have gone to the military academy of the northern frontier in the first place. It would have been better if he had come to my knight's acceptance for training. Then you can take him away." Lin Yuan glanced at the sloppy man and sneered. Since he wants to control the spy system of the army, this king will give him the chance. As for whether he has the ability or not, that is between you and him. Unremitting Night had been stationed on the Frost Mirror Plains ever since it was established. Their greatest enemy had never been the Northern rebels, and they didn't even have to do anything when the situation in the north changed. Their eyes had always been fixed on the Frost Mirror dynasty, and even the Great Wall project had been conceived by Yi Balan, the current division chief of Unremitting Night. Once the Great Wall was completed, Night would set up more outposts on the Frost Plain and train their own cavalry. Bit by bit, they would infiltrate the Shuangjian dynasty's military system and become Lin Yuan's poisonous fangs embedded in the Shuangjian dynasty, just like their predecessors in the other world had done to the Mongols. This kind of spy agency that was responsible for direct combat was the cruelest. If one wanted to become the leader of the entire wolf pack, he had to challenge his superiors again and again regardless of life and death. Only the strongest wolf could lead the entire tribe to hunt the strongest prey. The moment Zhang Xiuzhu showed his ambition to Knight's acceptance, Yi Balan and Zhang Xiuzhu would fight to the death. Of course, before that, he had to grow from a wolf cub to a wolf cub, and then to an adult wolf with his own codename. Only then would he be qualified to challenge Yi Balan. Yi Balan nodded and stepped back, disappearing from Li Zhong's sight again. Deploy well. The Xinwu dynasty is coming. Remember, we can't lose this war. Neither I nor the northern frontier can afford to lose. Lin Yuan glanced at Li Zhong and calmly instructed before leaving the room. Li Zhong shrugged his shoulders helplessly. When it was rumored that Lin Yuan was the reincarnation of the ancient demon emperor, Li Zhong didn't believe it. After all, no one would believe that an organization that they had never heard of would appear out of nowhere. However, the attitude of the top forces towards Lin Yuan and the treasures that Lin Yuan could easily take out and throw on the market made Li Zhong believe in this point. Therefore, no matter what special techniques Lin Yuan's trump cards practiced, Li Zhong wouldn't feel the slightest bit strange. It would only make Li Zhong feel that Lin Yuan was becoming more and more unfathomable. Due to the war treasury's mechanism of randomly refreshing items, not only did Lin Yuan obtain the method to cultivate demonic power, but there were also many techniques suitable for humans and even mountain-shaking apes. Lin Yuan had exchanged for all of them. Li Zhong's Son of Heaven gazing technique had come from the war treasury. Although the sales of phase had gradually decreased due to the saturation of the market, the low-grade techniques that Lin Yuan took out were not only the Northern Frontier Academy's entry-level manuals, but they were also treasures that the major forces didn't hesitate to spend a lot of money to obtain. The most outrageous thing was that Lin Yuan didn't have the slightest intention of only selling the techniques to one party. Every low-grade technique that he didn't like would be made into countless copies and sold to various places. It didn't matter if someone had bought the technique before. In order to learn it or to maintain the exclusivity, the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce would rush forward and buy all the techniques that they felt were useful. Before meeting Lin Yuan, Li Zhong had never thought that simply printing and selling books could actually become a more profitable business than selling phase. However, it was also because of the exchange of various cultivation methods that Lin Yuan squandered a lot of war points that he had accumulated. Therefore, he really wanted to win by hook or by crook in the face of this war, which was quite terrifying in terms of rewards and punishments, because he simply couldn't afford to lose. With 0 war points, if he wanted to pay that terrifying punishment, he would probably be sucked dry in an instant. After leaving Li Zhong's range of perception, Lin Yuan swung his dragon tail and crushed a lump of black mud. He controlled his demonic power to sweep away the black mud one by one. Then, he lifted the letter full of code words and glanced at the contents. Suddenly, a trace of horror flashed past his eyes. 3 days ago, the Jade Lake Immortal Palace's palace master personally left for the Shuangjian dynasty. Her purpose was to meet the great Khan of the Shuangjian dynasty. A simple sentence, but it contained an incomparably terrifying amount of information. If dragons had sweat glands, Lin Yuan would probably be covered in cold sweat at this moment. Chapter 536. Who in the world wanted immortality the most? Without a doubt, it had to be the emperor. Enjoying the supreme power and the melting of the human world, no matter how heroic these emperors were when they were young, they were still afraid of death when they were old. They were afraid that death would take everything away from them. Even the first emperor who had conquered the world from the weak Qin dynasty to the strong Qin dynasty was no exception. He wantonly searched for necromancers and even spent a lot of money to send Su Fu out to sea to find the elixir of immortality for him. Unfortunately, he could not escape the erosion of time and the great Qin dynasty died for the second time. Compared to the illusory legends in the previous life, the elixir of immortality on the Tianwu continent had appeared. After a period of accumulation, it had gained some fame and attracted many cultivators who were nearing the end of their lifespan to the Jade Lake Palace in the south of the Shenwu dynasty to take the elixir of immortality. Although everyone knew that those who took the elixir of immortality did not voluntarily become the Jade Lake Palace's consecrators, few could resist the temptation of immortality and threw themselves into the arms of the Jade Lake Palace. Now the Jade Lake Celestial Palace had accepted more than 100,000 tributes, and their cultivations were generally not low. Even the Shenwu dynasty at its peak would be afraid of such a force. However, Lei Qiuxing changed his previous domineering style and didn't do anything, as if the Jade Lake Celestial Palace didn't pose any threat to him. Some people guessed that the master behind the Jade Lake Palace was Lei Qiuxing. Some people guessed that Lei Qiuxing also wanted the elixir of immortality. But no matter what, the master of the Jade Lake Palace was already a powerful existence standing at the top of the Shenwu dynasty. If he wanted to meet the great Khan of the Shuangjian dynasty in the north, it would not be a small matter. When the great Khan was young, he was a terrifying existence that suppressed the Wanjian dynasty in the south and the Windsource dynasty in the north. If Mirafrost was a combination of wolf and dog, then this great Khan was a lion from head to toe, and a very aggressive one at that. Under his leadership, Even a puppy would quickly grow into a ferocious wolf. No matter how heavily wounded it would not hide with its tail between its legs to lick its wounds. Instead, it would continue to fight its opponent to the death until the victor was decided. After devouring its opponent's corpse, it would become even stronger and more terrifying, and then seek out its next opponent. When the Great Khan was young, the so-called famous generals Yan Xingqi, Lei Qiusheng, and even the Marshal Saint Qi of the Wind Source were all no match for him. Even when both sides joined forces, they were still defeated by the Great Khan. Could it be? The shock in Lin Yuan's eyes intensified. He knew very well what the elixir of immortality was. It could indeed give people immortality, but that was when they were separated from their physical bodies. Even their original memories would be blurred. Before their cultivation reached a certain level, they would only listen to the orders of a higher-level sky demon. They could not even be considered as sky demons. After all, sky demons still had their own thoughts. These inferior races were no different from dogs in the eyes of a sky demon. However, not many people knew about this. What they valued most was immortality. After all, in the Tianwu continent that had lost the top inheritances, except for the top forces, most cultivators only pursued immortality. Cultivators like Incubus who pursued the Great Tao were too few. A shortcut had appeared in front of them. Who knew how many people with weak minds would want to try it? Although the Great Khan had once pursued the Great Tao, he was now old and could reach the end of his lifespan at any moment. If he was only a cultivator, he would definitely resist the so-called elixir of immortality. However, he still had the identity of the Great Khan. At the same time, he also knew that once he died, the entire bloodbath tribe would be nibbled away by others. His bloodline and clansmen would become slaves of others. Even if there was a 1 in 10,000 chance, the Great Khan would not be willing to die. If he did not want to die, he would have to accept the elixir of immortality and turn into a sky demon. Lei Qiusheng, who was already in cahoots with the sky demon, and Frost Mirror Khan, who obeyed the sky demon's every word, how could the northern frontier resist the joint attack of the two empires? Damn it! What are these top forces doing? Lin Yuan cursed angrily. Ding Zai had said before that they did not care about the dispute between the Xinwu dynasty and the northern frontier, but the Sky Demon's rebellion could only occur within the Xinwu dynasty. Once the northern frontier was destroyed, they would immediately intervene and wipe out the Sky Demon's troops and Lei Qiusheng. Furthermore, the Sky Demon, who had left the Xinwu dynasty's territory, would also be their target. But even if they did not care, this was such a big matter. Could it be that no one had come to give him a heads up? Did they trust his intelligence agency, or were they held back by other matters? Ever since he knew what the system was hiding in his body and what kind of enemies he had to face were, Lin Yuan did not dare to believe in the so-called luck anymore. He had to prepare for the worst. Even with the promise of the top forces, Lin Yuan did not dare to bet on whether the palace master of the Jade Lake Immortal Palace could reach the Shuangjin dynasty safely. Because the top forces only valued Lin Yuan's potential, they thought that Lin Yuan was qualified to stand side by side with them in the future, so they showed goodwill to Lin Yuan. However, this did not mean that Lin Yuan now had the ability to challenge the top forces. In a situation where the two sides were not equal in strength, promises were powerless and laughable. Even if they did not carry out the promise, they could just casually find an excuse to brush off Lin Yuan. Would Lin Yuan fall out with them? No, I can't just sit here and wait for death. A cold light flashed in his multicolored eyes. Lin Yuan gritted his teeth and soared into the sky, rushing toward the south. Ding! Congratulations to the host for triggering a mission, life and death. The Sky Demon's minions have launched an attack. With the power of the northern frontier alone, you are like a small boat in the sea. So, will you choose to guard the northern frontier and wait for the crisis to come, or will you take the initiative to attack and eliminate the crisis? Ding! Detected that the host has made a choice. The mission content has been changed. Please quickly find the palace master of the Jade Lake Immortal Palace and destroy her and her minions. Mission reward, 1 premium lucky draw ticket. Failure punishment. Face the joint attack of the Xinwu and Shuangjian dynasties. Countdown to failure, 3 days and 14 hours. The long-awaited mission window once again appeared in Lin Yuan's mind. Lin Yuan, who had been hiding in the northern frontier for several months, had to give up on suppressing the hidden dangers in the northern frontier. He had to show his strength again and fight. Chapter 537. Ever since he had broken through to the Mountain Lord realm, Lin Yuan no longer had any interest in personally killing his enemies to obtain attribute points. This was because every level up in this realm required an incomparably large amount of attribute points. It was so large that Lin Yuan did not even know the exact number of attribute points. If he wanted to obtain a few or a dozen attribute points from killing his enemies, it would be like pouring a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. Lin Yuan now had two ways to rapidly increase his attribute points. One was to use the system to create a large number of life forms and then start a crazy war with all the surrounding forces. After all, Lin Yuan would also obtain a portion of attribute points from the lives these life forms killed. However, the cost-performance ratio of this method was very low. This was because Lin Yuan first had to obtain the materials from the life forms when creating life forms. After creating life forms, he still had to use his own stored attribute points to increase their strength. To put it bluntly, based on Moro's ability to create demonic beasts, the attribute points these demonic beasts gave Lin Yuan were not even as much as what Lin Yuan invested in them. There was still a long way to go before he could completely enter the mode where he could reap great rewards if he just left them alone. Furthermore, the demonic beasts he created were not immortal. Lin Yuan had already created several demonic beasts that had been upgraded to level 7 of the Wisdom Realm. However, they had all died in battle during the conflict with the Green Swamp clan. No matter how one looked at it, this path was not only a small reward, but also a high risk. It was also easy to lose everything. The other method was the Joss Flame model. This was the Joss Flame power that was produced when countless life forms worshipped Lin Yuan. In fact, it could be converted into various types of energy. Under a certain ratio, Lin Yuan could directly convert the Joss Flame power into attribute points. Although this function had not yet been activated due to the failure of the previous mission, every system model that accumulated to a certain extent would successively activate the sub-functions of the model. For example, the Territory model's Soldier Creation, the War model's War Treasury, and War Mission. Therefore, when the Joss Flame power accumulated to a certain extent, this conversion function would be activated sooner or later. The endless power of incense meant that even if Lin Yuan were to lie down and not move, he would be able to obtain a large number of attribute points. Moreover, the strands of Lin Yuan's divine sense in the Dragon King Temple could become Lin Yuan's doppelganger under the influence of the power of incense, helping him oversee the northern frontier's territory. Even if Lin Yuan's main body died, he could replace one of the strands of divine sense to continue living and use the power of incense to rebuild his body. The Dragon King Temple represented Lin Yuan's infinite life. Unless Lin Yuan was wiped out by the system, or if his opponent destroyed the Dragon King Temple and killed all his followers, Lin Yuan would never completely die. Even if he died, he could be reborn as a Yin Master. However, in that case, Lin Yuan would become a special life form that relied on the power of incense to exist and become stronger. He would be even more miserable than Li Zhong, who cultivated the Son of Heaven gazing at air. This was because the withered territory would only cause the ruler to lose all his cultivation and followers to be wiped out. However, it would cause a Yin Master to die directly. Lin Yuan was very sure that this Joss Flame model was the correct path for him to progress to the next stage of his growth. Moreover, the Joss Flame model itself was also an inexhaustible treasure. Of course, becoming a Yin Master was not completely without hidden dangers. This was because this was the path that the system had chosen for him. If the investiture of the gods was a battle between the Way of the Heavens and Hongjun, then escaping from the origin world of the Untainted Land was undoubtedly the best example. During the investiture of the gods, the insufferably arrogant experts had almost all fallen in the battle of the investiture of the gods. After that, they were listed on the investiture of the gods, which could be considered as a branch of the Yin Master. Their survival depended on the power of incense. It was not an exaggeration to call them slaves. After all, if one wanted to kill these gods, one only needed to say that they were superstitious. Slowly reducing their followers, their strength would become weaker and weaker. Even the insufferably arrogant experts of the Antiquity Age would gradually be unable to show their existence. Therefore, Lin Yuan was very sure that before he had enough strength to challenge Hongjun and the Way of the Heavens, he could walk this path. However, he could not walk too deep into it. Otherwise, the situation of those famous experts withering after becoming gods would reappear on him. However, the production of the power of incense was still a difficult problem for the current Lin Yuan. Therefore, he could not leave even if he wanted to. Because he had already become the god of the northern frontier, there were no other gods in this land. The Dragon King temples in various places were also flourishing with incense. However, this was meaningless because the people in the northern frontier did not sincerely believe in him. In the hearts of the people who did not know about the struggle between the upper class, even Li Zhong's prestige was higher than Lin Yuan's. This was because Lin Yuan's existence was good for the entire northern frontier. However, Li Zhong's actions had helped the people at the bottom to obtain benefits that they could see and touch. The people who had set up shrines to Li Zhong at home were more pious than Lin Yuan's. Those who knew about Lin Yuan's actions were either the heads of aristocratic families or the subordinates of Lin Yuan who existed for their own ambitions. They would treat Lin Yuan as an excellent ruler, but they would not treat Lin Yuan as a true god. Without devout believers, it was naturally impossible to produce the power of incense. Lin Yuan thought about this problem in his mind as he hurried on his way. Of course, he could easily make the people in the northern frontier become his devout believers. However, in that case, the meaning of Li Zhong's existence would be lost. Lin Yuan was also not suitable to do these things personally. After all, a monster doing its best for the welfare of the human people. Not to mention whether others would believe this, even Lin Yuan himself felt awkward. System, tell me, how can I obtain the power of incense? Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes slightly and asked in a deep voice. The system maintained its silence, obviously unwilling to respond to Lin Yuan. After all, it had already planned out the path to obtain the power of incense for Lin Yuan. It had even offered the big pie of conversion templates. However, Lin Yuan did not do as it wished and even failed the mission. After entering the arcane realm and consuming the dragonization root, he even obtained the nether realm's black water, an innate talent that even the system had to be wary of. It would be strange if it still wanted to respond to Lin Yuan. When humans are faced with despair, they will seek comfort from the spiritual level. If you want the people in the northern frontier to worship and worship you, then your actions are undoubtedly a failure. This is because they are safe, happy, and prosperous under your control. They believe that everything they want can be obtained through their own efforts. The existence of a god does not mean much to them. Under such circumstances, if you expect them to worship you as a god, then you might as well expect the power of incense to appear out of thin air. After a long while, the system finally complained somewhat helplessly. Chapter 538. Lin Yuan rolled his eyes helplessly at the system's ridicule. He didn't think his actions were wrong. After all, he lived in a blissful era without any legends of gods. In the world of his previous life, everything could be obtained through hard work. After coming to this world, Lin Yuan used his own hard work to transform the northern frontier into what he knew. This northern frontier would make Lin Yuan feel close and familiar, and wouldn't make him feel out of place as an outsider with memories of his previous life. But here was the problem. Because this time, he wasn't walking in the world as a human. He was that god. As a god, he was telling the world that even without the blessings of gods, they could obtain everything through their own hard work. Wasn't this dragging himself down? Host, you still have a chance to repent. As long as you give up part of the benefits of the northern frontier and let the northern frontier return to its previous path, you can use facts to tell the world that without your protection, everything they see is just a bubble that can collapse at any time. Under such circumstances, they will quickly give up on the idea of a new life and worship you, the high and mighty god, once again. The system couldn't be bothered to ridicule Lin Yuan's actions. Lin Yuan's origin world had abolished feudal superstitions and rejected all kinds of supernatural beings because that was the method used by the heavenly axiom to deal with the increasingly powerful gods. After all, the heavenly axiom didn't rely on the power of faith to exist. However, as the god it chose, Lin Yuan didn't hesitate to use such methods. He was simply making life difficult for himself. This also caused Lin Yuan's cultivation to progress slowly after he became a mountain lord, and he still hadn't broken through to the second level of the mountain lord realm. This was a classic example of me against myself. It seemed that although Lin Yuan's actions were dragging himself down, it wasn't to the point where he couldn't be saved. This was because although the people of the northern frontier had experienced a change of dynasties, they were still the same people. They still had a sense of reverence for powerful cultivators and ancient gods. As long as Lin Yuan was willing to let them face despair, they would still worship Lin Yuan as their faith, and he would be able to create an endless supply of incense. I'll think about it. Lin Yuan took a deep breath and began to travel at full speed. In ancient times, Regardless of whether it was humans or gods, they all had the power to lift things as if they were light. It was a power that was enough to make the heavenly Tao tremble in fear. For example, even King Zhou of Shang, the first fatuous ruler of all time, was a terrifying existence known as the King of Men. He was so terrifying that he did not feel any psychological burden when he did something like molesting Nuwa. Nuwa could not even do anything to him. She could only use all kinds of tricks to plot against King Zhou of Shang and make him lose his kingly aura. That was how Zhou replaced Shang. On the other hand, if what happened in the future of Untainted Land was as Lin Yuan had guessed, the position of King Zhou should be Lin Yuan's future goal. An existence that could be compared to Hong Jun and the Heavenly Tao. That's right, they're on the same level. He did not care about Nuwa, who was in Hong Jun's camp. At the same time, the entire Great Zhou faction was his enemy. This was because King Zhou was known as the King of Men, while the Emperor of Zhou was known as the Son of Heaven. This title already explained too many problems. The ruler of the Shang dynasty was the King of Men, who represented the human race. He was an existence that could wrestle with the Heavenly Tao and Hong Jun's camps. Even in the secular world, the Shang dynasty had absolute power. Even the sages could not do anything to him. Although King Zhou was the loser, he was not defeated by any side. It was the other two camps that joined forces to deal with him. This also showed that Hong Jun and the Heavenly Tao were afraid of this King of Men. Of course, in the process of the two camps dealing with the King of Men, the one who had the last laugh was still the origin of the Heavenly Tao. This was because the victor's king called himself the Son of Heaven, which implied that he was the eldest son or son of heaven. However, the Heavenly Tao obtained the ruling power of the secular world, while Hong Jun's side came up with a list of deification, officially putting the special existence of God on the stage. They told the world that everything was bestowed by God. Even if the Son of Heaven was unvirtuous, it would make the gods angry and cause all kinds of natural and man-made disasters. They tried to place God above man, and then started the second battle between the two sides. In order to erase the influence of the gods on the secular world, the Heavenly Tao of the source world could be said to have painstakingly gone through the changes of countless dynasties. Finally, the so-called Son of Heaven's right was banned, and the high and mighty emperor was beaten into a mortal. All kinds of beliefs and sacrifices were cancelled. It was not easy to make God become a legend and gradually fade away. However, in this battle, the winner might not necessarily be the Heavenly Tao. This was because although it banned the concept of God, man, who had been unable to recover from the setback after King Zhou, rose again. He used the power of science and technology to fight against the Heavenly Tao. Even the title of Son of Heaven was abolished. After a short conversation, Lin Yuan quickly straightened out his thoughts. Firstly, the Heavenly Tao and Hong Jun were not existences that he could not contend with. This was because the former King Zhou and the previous King of Men, in his previous life, had become victors through a long period of time and hard work. They had become existences that the Heavenly Tao and Hong Jun feared. Secondly, Lin Yuan had also determined his future path. King Zhou. He was not a mortal with a physical body. He, who had the ability to cultivate, did not need to completely rely on the power of science and technology. He could completely become an existence like King Zhou, and directly participate in the struggle between Hong Jun and the Heavenly Tao. He did not need to use the power of science and technology to deter the other two camps, and simply make them not dare to use him as a chess piece. Lin Yuan did not like to be schemed against, and he did not like to have his life and death in the hands of others. Therefore, his goal was not to protect himself, but to win. He wanted to let these existences, who had been high and mighty since the prehistoric times, know the will and power of man. Even though he had lost the appearance and habits of a human, the essence of Lin Yuan's soul had not changed for a moment. Even when he came to this world, the thoughts that constantly spurred him to become stronger and return to his original world to take revenge had not faded for a moment. It was just that before that, he had a new goal. Whatever. However, I have to remind the host that no matter how powerful a life form is, there is a limit to its lifespan. Although you are very young, it is still very difficult for you to enter the next realm without relying on the power of incense. And even if you can do it, how will you cross the next realm? You are the host chosen by this system. In the future, you will also evolve into a life form that will make all the world submit to you. Although this system will not force you to do anything, it will re-examine your potential at any time. If you lose the space to improve, This system will unbind you at any time and choose a new host. Chapter 539. Listening to the system's cold, electronically synthesized voice, Lin Yuan's eyes flashed with a hint of mockery. This was the reason why he had always wanted to transcend the system and obtain the power that truly belonged to him. Everything he had now was given to him by the system. If the two sides really turned against each other one day, then the system would unbind him and he would be nothing. He would be thankful if he could return to being a little black snake and live out the rest of his life. In addition, Lin Yuan also planned to deepen his cooperation with the Incubus. From the words of the Incubus, although they were similar to the rebel army in Hongjuan's eyes, they did not have a close relationship with the heavenly Tao. Moreover, from a historical perspective, the strength of this rebel army could be said to be quite terrifying. After the fall of the Zhou dynasty, the great Qin Empire swept through the 6 states and became the first emperor, but he was not called the Son of Heaven. Later, there were legends that said that Ing Zhang was the ancestor dragon. Therefore, the rebel army of the Incubus had also won in this multi-sided competition. Although the great Qin Empire had fallen for 2 generations, the amount of information was too much for Lin Yuan at this moment. This meant that the rebel army of the Incubus once had the power to fight against the heavenly Tao and Hongjun. Although they failed in the end, the fighting experience passed down by the victors was still worth learning. 4 hours later, a fleet of turrets set off northward from the lower reaches of the Wei River under the jurisdiction of the Shenwu dynasty. A young man in white put his hands behind his back. Scarlet light flickered in his clear black and white eyes. This fleet of turrets did not have any flags, but the scale of more than 300 turrets was not something that could be casually gathered by just anyone. With the scale of the turrets of the Shenwu dynasty, each turrets could carry 3,000 soldiers. If this fleet was full, this team could instantly bring out a lineup of nearly 900,000 soldiers to fight a battle. Even the 5,000 soldiers of the Fallen Star Army, who were patrolling the area at the moment, would not have been able to do anything to them. What was even more terrifying was that the ones patrolling the perimeter of the ship were also dressed in white, with swords hanging from their waists. Even the weakest among them was at level 6 of the airborne realm. If that was all there was to it, the cultivators trained by the northern region would have been on par with them. However, the oldest among the group of people dressed in white looked to be in his late 20s, and there was no lack of teenagers in their teens. Even those top-notch sects and clans might not have been able to gather such a team of such a level of cultivation and scale. The merchant ships coming and going on the Wei River were all shocked for a while when they saw this huge fleet of turrets pass by their own fleet. "We won't run into any trouble, will we, first generation?" Behind the young man in white was a girl in white with eyebrows and eyes. She looked to be around 13 or 14 years old, and even her facial features were not fully developed yet. However, the aura on her body was extremely terrifying. The aura of a heavenly strength realm overflowed, and even the merchant ships passing by did not dare to look at this luxurious turrets at the center of the fleet. The young man looked at the raging waters of the Wei River, and a wicked smile appeared on his handsome face. He said in a cold voice, "No matter how powerful the Black Jiao is, it is nothing but a beast. Those rumors about how powerful it is are just a bunch of trash who dare not face their own failure and are just trying to brag about it. Not to mention that it can't detect that we are going through the Wei River. Even if it did, do you think I would be afraid of it?" At this point, the young man slowly clenched his fists, and his expression became somewhat ferocious. "We are the powerful divine ones. How can these weak humans and demonic beasts stop us?" The girl in white curled her lips, but she did not dare to refute. This was because the young man in white in front of her was the first generation, the pure-blooded sky demon with the noblest bloodline. Not to mention those existences on the surrounding turrets who had taken the elixir of immortality and turned into sky demons. Even an ordinary sky demon like her would not be able to show any disrespect or hostility to him under the suppression of this bloodline. After all, there was almost no meaning in making peace with a sky demon without a physical body. The first-generation sky demon that was born under such circumstances would directly crush all the other sky demons in terms of bloodline. Even their parents would only have the qualifications to bow down in front of them. However, whether or not this exceptional talent feared the Black Flood Dragon was something that different people had different opinions about. If the Black Jiao was really not worth mentioning, as he said, this first generation would not have released the news that the Jade Lake Heavenly Palace was going to visit the Khan of the Shuangjian dynasty in advance. Furthermore, he had prepared a sky demon army that was not weak and had followed the original plan to travel by land to the Shuangjian dynasty. while he led all the remaining forces of the Jade Lake Heavenly Palace north from the Wei River to the Frost Plains. If this was not fear, what else could it be? At this moment, a figure in white suddenly flew out of the ship at the forefront. A moment later, a sky demon at Airborne Realm Level 9 knelt in front of the First Generation with one knee and said in a deep voice, "First Generation, there is an army of the northern frontier ahead of us that has set up a blockade. They want us to provide proof of our identity, otherwise we will not be allowed to pass." The First Generation's expression turned slightly gloomy, and he coldly said, "How many times do I have to tell you? Do not call me First Generation when we are out there. You have to call me Palace Lord or Young Master Zhao." "Yes, Palace Lord. Please punish us for our ignorance, Palace Lord." The sky demon gasped and directly pressed his head to the floor, his body trembling slightly. The Palace Lord waved his hand in annoyance and coldly said, "Forget it. There is no need to argue with a sky demon like you. Do you know which army of the northern frontier is setting up a blockade? There was no navy in the northern frontier, or rather, there was no human navy. The ones hibernating in the Wei River were all aquatic monsters loyal to Lin Yuan. These monsters lurking in the water could easily cut through the depths of ships, making it impossible for humans to stand in the Wei River. They also took advantage of the environment to fight humans, making it easy for them to drag humans who were stronger than them into the river and devour them. Therefore, compared to the wide waters of the Wei River, the Xinwu dynasty was more inclined to fight at the source of the Wei River, where the water flow was slow and the water was narrow. Now that a fleet of ships suddenly appeared out of nowhere and claimed to be the army of the northern frontier, it was easy to be stunned. "I have asked, and they said that they are the Blackwater Army, but before this I have never heard of the Blackwater Army. However, they have the military identification of the northern frontier on them, so they should be the newly established army of the northern frontier." The sky demon tried his best to calm down his trembling voice, but it was difficult to do so in front of the temperamental Palace Lord. Previously, there was a sky demon from a different race who bumped into the Palace Lord and had his throat pierced by the Palace Lord. Even his soul was pulled out and eaten by the Palace Lord. Chapter 540. Blackwater Army? I've never heard of them before. The Palace Master waved his hand indifferently and said in a cold voice, "Inform all the ships to prepare for battle. We're going to rush over." As a noble divine race, the Palace Master had never put the weak human beings in his eyes. After all, human beings were nothing more than flesh and blood for them and could be replaced at any time. If the Southern Expedition or the Fallen Star Army were to stop them, he would be patient enough to take out the identity documents prepared by Lei Qiuxing and give them to the other party, so as to avoid unnecessary trouble. But how dare a mere army that he had never heard of stop his fleet? Sky Demon lowered his head and responded. His figure once again rushed out, not daring to stay here for a moment longer. On the other side, seeing the change in the formation of the ships, Qin Yu narrowed his eyes slightly and said in a cold voice, "Shameless things. Such a large fleet is not allowed to enter the Wei River. I just let them prove their identity and haven't driven them back yet. Since you want to rush over?" As an outstanding figure in the star class of the northern frontier, although Qin Yu was a general in the archer ranks, water battles were also the battlefield of archers, so he had also participated in the relevant training. Naturally, he could easily see that the formation of the other side's ships had changed into a battle formation. In fact, the Blackwater Army didn't care about the Wei River basin at all. This was the territory of the aquatic demon beasts. It was just that the other side was unlucky and happened to encounter the Blackwater Army that had retreated to the northern frontier. Therefore, they blocked the river and set up defenses to let the other side prove their identity. Beat the drum and summon the demon beasts of the Wei River. Messenger, release the signal flare and summon the surrounding troops. Zhao Guangchong stretched his shoulders, picked up his sky piercer, and walked towards the warships waiting beside the big ship. Soon, more than 30 battleships set off and quickly approached the tower ship that was changing its formation. Zhao Guangchong carried the sky piercer on his shoulder, coldly looked at the huge ship that was blocking his way, and said coldly, "Everyone on the ship, listen to me. Wei River is now under the jurisdiction of the northern frontier. You have not proven your identity, and you have violated the rule that no ships with more than 10,000 people are allowed to enter Wei River. Now, I will give you two choices. One is to turn back to the port you sailed from, and the other is..." Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Without waiting for Zhao Guangchong to finish his words, The men in white on the ship took out their bows and launched an attack. "You're courting death!" Zhao Guangchong roared and waved the sky piercer in his hand, sweeping away the arrows that were flying towards him. With the Blackwater Army's equipment, these crossbows weren't enough to hurt them at all. However, the opponent's disregard for them was tantamount to giving them a resounding slap in the face. What kind of existence was the Blackwater Army? It was one of the best troops in the northern frontier. Even if it wasn't well known, its degree of terror was directly equal to the 5,000-old soldiers of the Fallen Star Army. After all, those who could join the Blackwater Army were all members of the Star class of the northern frontier. As long as they were given enough time to grow, they would be able to lead an army by themselves in the future. Their status was much higher than the so-called Shen Lin Jun reserves. This round of shooting by the Jade Lake Immortal Palace was tantamount to offending 80% of the generals who would carry the northern frontier in the future. But the Jade Lake Immortal Palace didn't care, because they were the high and mighty immortal sky demon. They didn't care about the weak human race at all. Without needing Zhao Guangchong's order, more than 30 warships quickly approached the ship. Soldiers wearing black scale armor stepped on the warships and jumped to the edge of the ship, waving the weapons in their hands and starting a hand-to-hand combat. There were more than 10,000 people on the warships that were attacked, but they were completely defeated by the Blackwater Army, which was less than 300 people. Not only did they fail to recapture the edge of the ship, but they were also attacked deeper and deeper by the enemy. In a naval battle, the advantage in numbers was actually meaningless, because if one's cultivation didn't reach a certain level, it was impossible to walk on water as if it was flat ground. Coupled with the height of the ship itself, unless one could fly, the ones fighting with the Blackwater Army would always be a small group of Jade Lake Immortal Palace members at the front. As the warships relied on their fast speed to transport more and more Blackwater Army to the warships, the first few warships instantly went out of control. The nearby warships that weren't attacked began to quickly approach in an attempt to provide support, but before they could sail far, the demon beasts lurking under the water had already successfully penetrated their transmission line. The gradually sinking ship suddenly frightened many people. But these people in white all had good cultivation, so they quickly jumped to the nearest warship. Only a few members of the Jade Lake Immortal Palace who were too weak carelessly fell into the Wei River. Then, without even a moment of struggle, they were dragged down by the aquatic demon beasts. In just the blink of an eye, the water around the sunken ship was dyed red, and even the surging Wei River couldn't wash away the blood in an instant. Counterattack! The palace master roared with a gloomy face, his hands on the railing of the warship. His warship had been specially modified, so it was impossible for those demon beasts to penetrate the bottom of the ship. But this was only one ship, and the rest of the warships would sink sooner or later. Hundreds of thousands of people couldn't be squeezed on one ship. In that case, even if the demon beasts didn't attack, the ship would sink because it couldn't bear the weight. When they lost their footing, they would all die here. With the palace master's order, the sky demon on the other warships didn't care that their allies were still fighting. They took out their bows and began to shoot at the warships that were gradually occupied by the Blackwater Army. But their arrows didn't cause much damage to the Blackwater Army, and instead killed many of their own people. Qin Yu, who was in charge at the rear, raised the corner of his mouth and sneered, "Showing off your slight skill in front of an expert. Blackwater Archer Battalion, listen to my order. Aim at those people in white who aren't fighting in close combat with our fellow soldiers. Fire at full power and kill them." The words, "fire at full power," didn't mean much to ordinary archers, but to the Blackwater Archer Battalion, this order had another meaning: burning money. Yes, burning money. When fighting at a distance above the Wei River, it was almost impossible to recover the sharp arrows made of the crimson steel mastiff bones. Except for those arrows that were embedded in bodies, almost all of them would be washed away by the surging Wei River. It was also impossible for the arrows to be embedded in bodies. Such arrows could only be pierced through several people in a row and then got stuck in abnormally hard bones. Otherwise, with the physical fitness of airborne realm cultivators, there was no way they could withstand such arrows. The economic losses caused by a round of volleys were enough to bankrupt a medium-sized family in an instant. This was one of the ways the Blackwater Army fought, throwing money at the enemy. Chapter 541. The wooden planks of the ships, the bodies of the members of the Jade Lake Divine Palace. Under the barrage of the Blackwater archers, they were as fragile as thin pieces of paper. In just 2 breaths of time, more than a dozen ships at the front of the team were shot full of holes, and the people in white on the ships were directly wiped out. Be it in terms of destructive power or efficiency, they were much more terrifying than the melee Blackwater army that had been slaughtering at the beginning. Crack! The uncontrollable power caused the palace lord to crush the fence in front of her, and the scarlet color in her eyes became even more intense. All of the Sky Demon carriers she brought out were late Airborne Realm and even Heavenly Dipper Realm. Although they were all cultivators, such power was enough to make any regular army tremble in fear, unless they were fighting existences at the level of Shen Lin Jun and Shuel Yao Knight. However, the Blackwater army she heard before was suspected to be a new name set up in the northern frontier, a small army that was not well known. Could this be called a ragtag army that was not well known? First generation, do you want us to go up there? The girl in white frowned, and her face was also somewhat gloomy. As an ordinary sky demon, she was one of the earliest beings to come to this world, and her physical strength had been nourished to the Heavenly Dipper realm. There were more than 10,000 people at her level in this team. The combat strength of 10,000 Heavenly Dipper realm sky demon was not something that those inferior airborne realm sky demons could compare with. The palace master shook his head gently and said hatefully, "Order the rear army to retreat. It's just a miscellaneous army. It's not worthy of our noble Tian clan to fight in person. Let's wait until they have the name of the Falling Star Army." Yes. The girl in white cupped her hands and responded in a deep voice, although she did not think so in her heart. Because in her view, this noble first generation had been frightened by the Black Jiao's reputation of winning every battle, and had lost the will to fight in a situation where the situation was unfavorable. Not worthy of the noble heavenly ones to fight, it was nothing more than an excuse. In the end, she was afraid and felt that she could not win this battle. "Commander Qin, something is not right." A Blackwater archer trotted to Qin Yu's side and frowned. "The ships that have not come into contact with us have begun to retreat, but those people in white who were abandoned are not affected at all. Instead, they are attacking Commander Zhao's team even more frantically, as if they don't seem to be afraid of death, right?" The corners of Qin Yu's mouth curled up slightly as she interrupted the Blackwater archer. Then she waved her hand and said in a cold voice, "These guys should be members of the Jade Lake Immortal Palace and not humans." According to Lord Dragon King's description, the death of their physical bodies does not mean that they will truly die. Their main bodies are spirits. Therefore, killing their physical bodies will only allow their spirits to break free from their shackles. Once they find a suitable physical body, they will be able to revive. The Blackwater archer was shocked. As members of the Northern Frontier's Star Generals class, they indeed knew many secrets, but compared to Qin Yu and Zhao Guangchong, the information they knew was too little. It was just like how they knew about the Jade Lake Immortal Palace and the Elixir of Immortality. They also knew that the Elixir of Immortality was a trap, but they did not know what the Sky Demon was. Just a group of filthy parasites. Qin Yu pursed his lips and said in a deep voice, "Send those white porcelain bottles to Commander Zhao's side. I want to see if these dregs who rely on other races for the sake of immortality really don't know death." The white porcelain bottles were the demon-suppressing artifacts that Lin Yuan and the Southern Frontier's top forces had agreed to use. Although they were made of ordinary materials, they had engraved a Sky Demon sealing array inside the bottles when they were made. Once the bottles were opened, they would absorb the Sky Demon's body that had been separated from its physical body, and then use the power of the array to shackle the Sky Demon. Of course, the demon-suppressing artifacts were not a long-term solution. They could only seal the Sky Demon for 3 days. If the Sky Demon could not be transported to a forbidden area with a higher-level sealing array within 3 days, the Sky Demon would break out of the seal and quickly escape. Moreover, the stronger the Sky Demon, the faster it would break out of the seal. This demon sealing bottle could only restrain 1 Sky Demon at a time, and its effective range was only a pitiful 2 meters. It was the lowest level of demon-suppressing artifacts, but it was the most that the top forces could spare to support Lin Yuan. It was originally a demon-suppressing artifact that was supposed to be sent to the northern frontier, and distributed to the various armies on the northern frontier. Unexpectedly, they had already started using it before they had even entered the northern frontier. For the northern frontier, this was not good news, because this meant that the Sky Demon's tentacles had already begun to infiltrate the northern frontier. Moreover, the northern frontier did not have any place to suppress demons. It was said that the whereabouts of Lin Yuan, who could kill the Sky Demon, was currently unknown. At the very least, with Qin Yu's authority, He did not have the qualifications to know the whereabouts of Lin Yuan's original body. Sure enough, with the demon's sealing bottle thrown in, those fearless people in white began to hesitate and retreat. It was as if they would rather be shot to death by those sharp arrows than engage in close combat with the Blackwater army. One by one, the demon's sealing bottle was sent back from the front line to the rear. The bottle's body was constantly trembling, and the red light that represented the sealing array was also flourishing. Such a strange scene caused many of the Blackwater army soldiers responsible for transporting the demon's sealing bottle to tremble in fear. They did not even know what they were fighting with. Because there were no demons and monsters in the Tianwu continent, even if they were transformed into Yin spirits, they still had a physical body. The appearance of these invisible things challenged the understanding of all the Blackwater army soldiers. On the side of the Blackwater army, on the side of the Jade Lake Immortal Palace, each and every one of them looked as if they had died. Especially as the first-generation palace master, she almost broke her silver teeth from gritting them. The northern frontier was a new force, and they had not fought with the creatures on the other side of the Tianwu continent. At this moment, they had guessed their identity, and even took out the demon's sealing bottle, which was an extremely terrifying weapon against the sky demon. All these signs pointed to one thing, that Trash Lei Qiuxing did not hide their whereabouts at all. Those top forces of the Tianwu continent had long known of their existence. Compared to the mysterious Black Jiao, the palace master was obviously more afraid of those top forces. Therefore, even if she was afraid, she still gritted her teeth and ordered, "The appearance of the demon-suppressing weapon means that our existence is no longer a secret. If we do not quickly break the deadlock, we will be wiped out sooner or later. It is time for you to be loyal to the divine race. Listen to my orders. All of you go forward and kill this damned army. Destroy all the demon-suppressing weapons." A group of ordinary sky demon soldiers who had long been eager to give it a try received the first generation's order. They all cheered and stepped into the air, heading straight for Zhao Guangchong and the others who were killing everywhere. There were also some who rushed towards the position of the Blackwater archers. Chapter 542. Despite the extravagant equipment the Blackwater army had, the gap between their cultivation and combat prowess was still not to be ignored. Tens of thousands of Heaven's Strength Realm Sky Demon were thrown into the battlefield, suppressing Zhao Guangchong and the others in an instant. Even the arrows were blocked by the invisible Qi of Vigor, either deviating from their targets or falling into the Wei River. The situation of the entire battlefield was completely reversed in an instant. While fighting was not what cultivators were good at, no one could deny that when an individual's strength reached a certain level, factors such as equipment and battle formations would no longer pose a huge threat. After all, both of those factors were derivatives that could allow one side to easily defeat the other side when both sides were of equal strength. However, an airborne realm cultivator, even if equipped with excellent equipment, was no more than a child with a gun. In the eyes of a real adult, they would still be unable to withstand a single blow. Qin Yu clenched his fists slightly and stared at the battlefield before him, gradually feeling the pressure. PFFTT. 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 At that moment, the nearby water suddenly exploded. Black tentacles reached out from the bottom of the water with a sharp sound, entangling the sky demon who were flying toward the Blackwater Archer Battalion. Monsters! The palace lord frowned slightly. Even if Heaven's Strength Realm cultivators were so strong that they could release their Qi of Vigor to avoid water, they would not be able to last long in the face of a great river like the Wei River, which flowed endlessly. As such, the existence of aquatic monsters was still a headache for them. It was also the reason why humans had never been interested in the islands or even the vast seas. The advantage aquatic monsters had in this aspect was enough to drag any opponent to death. Even if one's cultivation level was higher and stronger, one might not be able to catch the aquatic monsters in the water. However, if one did not go ashore, the monsters would have plenty of ways to kill them. However, the worry between the palace lord's brows disappeared in a flash. Aquatic demonic beasts were indeed not easy to deal with, but to the sky demon, his physical body was just something that could be abandoned at any time. Even if the Heaven Realm Sky Demon could not break free from the black tentacles, his life would not be in danger. At most, he would just go back and change his physical body and recuperate for a while. However, the black tentacles were obviously not that simple. After wrapping around the Sky Demon, they actually bit into his flesh bit by bit. But from the outside, there was no trace of them. At most, There was a circle of faint black marks where the tentacles had been wrapped, as if the black tentacles had directly melted away. However, it wasn't as simple as just disappearing. The palace master watched as the sky demon that had been entangled by the sky demon clutched their heads in pain and quickly fell toward the Wei River. Poison! The palace lord cried out in alarm. A look of fear flashed across his eyes, which were flickering with scarlet light. To the sky demon, his physical body was indeed something that could be abandoned at any time. However, he had always kept a respectful distance from those mysterious poisons. After all, according to scientific theory, the sky demon was a kind of spiritual body. Among the poisons, there were many that could cause damage to the mind and even erase the consciousness of the poisoned person, directly turning him into a walking corpse. However, although the sky demon was afraid of poisons, it was extremely difficult to eliminate the sky demon through them. Either the poison was too strong and would immediately take effect the moment it entered the body, or it would have a very long incubation period and would only explode when the sky demon let down his guard. Otherwise, the sky demon could abandon his physical body at any time and throw away the poisoned body like trash. However, the palace master had never seen such a situation before. Because those heavenly demons looked like they were in great pain, it was obvious that this poison could harm them, but it was not the kind of strong poison that could kill them instantly. But until now, none of the heavenly demons had given up their physical bodies and used their spiritual bodies to get rid of the poison. Dozens of Heaven Dipper realm white-clothed people fell into the Wei River, only causing a large splash. Then there was no sound. Not even a single sky demon's spiritual body came out. Somehow, the palace master felt a trace of uneasiness. As time passed, this uneasiness grew stronger. Jade Lake Palace Master, we are honored by your presence. Why didn't you greet this king? Lin Yuan's huge body slowly broke through the surface of the Wei River. His sharp heterochromatic eyes penetrated the cover of dozens of ships and landed directly on the palace master's face. The murderous intent in his eyes was so cold that the palace master couldn't help but shiver from thousands of meters away. However, the palace master didn't lose to Lin Yuan. The palace master returned the cold gaze to Lin Yuan and said coldly, "Do I need the Northern Frontier's approval to go wherever I go? What's the difference between greeting and not greeting? Does the Dragon King intend to start an all-out war with my Jade Lake Palace?" "Ha!" Lin Yuan laughed strangely and said in a mocking tone, "Jade Lake Palace? What a big tone. Could it be that in Hongjuan's eyes, lackeys like you who have abandoned your physical body and ego are considered immortals?" As his voice fell, Lin Yuan's eyes revealed a trace of astonishment. Because he had indeed said the two words Hongjun, but when the words came out of his mouth, the two words had become you. It was as if an invisible force had forcefully corrected the words that Lin Yuan had blurted out. However, it was unknown whether it was a trick of incubus or the system residing in Lin Yuan's body. Only after this sentence was changed did Lin Yuan realize that he had forgotten himself due to his anger. The system still hadn't revealed its identity. The origin of Heavenly Tao was just a guess that Lin Yuan had made after obtaining some information from Incubus. The battle between Hongjun and the Heavenly Tao wasn't something that he could come into contact with. Therefore, revealing the master behind the sky demon wouldn't do Lin Yuan any good. Instead, it would make the system, suspected of being the Heavenly Tao, wary and murderous of him. As for the other side, there was no need to talk about it. An existence that could steal the Heavenly Tao couldn't possibly have weak magical powers. Even the twisted and dirty evil gods in the myths of Krusu in his previous life couldn't be directly called by their names. How could Hongjun, as the most powerful person in the untainted land, not have the corresponding means? Now that Lin Yuan didn't have any means to conceal himself, if he directly said the name Hongjun, the other party would probably be able to travel through endless time and space in an instant and wipe out this future danger in the cradle. Even the system might not be able to escape. Everyone cultivates for immortality, but immortality is just empty talk if they don't become immortals. I have granted them immortality. Don't they deserve to be called immortals? The palace master put his hands behind his back and sized up Lin Yuan with cold eyes. Chapter 543. You think you're worthy? Lin Yuan narrowed his eyes and sneered. Who do you think you are? You don't even have the slightest idea, so I'll help you. As soon as he said this, the surface of the Wei River began to churn, and a black body of water that the water could not bring away appeared. Immediately after, distorted and ugly humanoid creatures struggled to crawl out of the black water. From their pale faces, one could vaguely see that they were originally human, but their pale skin was abnormally wrinkled like dried tree bark. Their eyes also did not have pupils and the whites of their eyes. Instead, there was a scarlet red light. Black liquid continuously flowed out of their slightly open mouths. Their mouths were filled with sharp, crisscrossing fangs. They looked 70% like beasts and 30% like humans. There were also some figures wrapped in black armor. They looked more like humans, but their hair and eyebrows were reddish-brown, and their eye sockets were filled with purple light. The former were inferior sky demons that had taken the elixir of immortality, while the latter were ordinary sky demons that had come from the other side of the heavenly gate. This is... The palace master's eyes widened, and he looked at Lin Yuan and the sky demon that had revealed their true forms in disbelief. As a first generation with a noble bloodline, he naturally knew what the sky demon's true forms were like. That was why he felt shock and fear when these monsters appeared. The sky demon was a spiritual body, and they could only reveal their true forms under extremely special circumstances. During these times, the sky demon would often crazily make peace, trying to give birth to a powerful first-generation sky demon. However, on the Tianwu continent, this was the first time the sky demon had appeared in their true forms. Moreover, the palace master did not see any desire in the eyes of the sky demon. However, they could not be described as clear-headed, because their eyes were filled with madness, or perhaps it could be said that they wanted to destroy everything. Do you want to kill? Go. Drag your fellow clansmen down and let them go where they belong. Lin Yuan looked at the ferocious monsters standing on the water surface, and a rare trace of gentleness appeared in his eyes. This was the first time he had used the Netherrealm Black Water, but he could clearly feel that the sky demon that had been pulled into the Netherrealm Black Water was like an extension of his body. As long as he had a thought, these ugly and ferocious monsters would do whatever he wanted. However, Lin Yuan did not receive any attribute points. He did not know if this talent conflicted with the system, or if these sky demon were only controlled by the Netherrealm's black water and not dead. However, it didn't matter. Lin Yuan sized up the palace master with a mocking gaze. In just a few breaths of time, the palace master's face regained its composure. She said coldly, "Dragon King, I don't understand what you mean. Do you think you can slander the immortals of the Jade Lake Immortal Palace by releasing a few monsters?" With that, the palace master waved his sleeves, and his tone became even colder. "Who will go get rid of these monsters for me?" As soon as he finished speaking, more than 10 Heaven Star Realm Sky Demons shot out. Although they did not know what method Lin Yuan had used, under the orders of the first king, there was no possibility of them refusing. In just one exchange, apart from the Heaven Star Realm Sky Demon that could barely hold on, the inferior Sky Demon were almost instantly killed. However, a moment later, the pool of black water beside Lin Yuan wriggled again. Soon, the slaughtered inferior Sky Demon actually appeared in front of everyone again. This was the tyranny of the Nether Realm's black water. Once they entered the Nether Realm's black water, only Lin Yuan could control their life and death. Unless Lin Yuan wanted their souls to scatter, they would still be reborn in the Nether Realm's black water even if they were killed countless times and then reincarnated again. Therefore, Lin Yuan could give any orders to the things controlled by the Nether Realm's black water. These existences had no other desires but to be completely freed. And the only one who could give them that freedom was the master of the Nether Realm's black water, Lin Yuan. Slaughter, rebirth, slaughter again, and rebirth again. The experts of the Jade Lake Immortal Palace tore apart these sky demon bodies again and again. However, a moment later, these controlled sky demon bodies would be reborn in the Nether Realm's black water. Perhaps it was because they had died too many times, but these heavenly demons started to show signs of insanity or numbness. They were no longer like when they had just been reborn. They would subconsciously avoid the enemy's attacks and show expressions of fear. In their eyes, there was nothing in the world that was worthy of their fear except for Lin Yuan. Therefore, when faced with the attacks of the experts of the Jade Lake Immortal Palace, not only did they not make any movements to dodge, but they also madly affected the opponent's attacks and then clawed, bit, and madly counterattacked. During this time, there were 2 experts of the Jade Lake Immortal Palace who had the idea of capturing the ringleader to capture the bandits. They directly bypassed the controlled sky demon bodies to attack Lin Yuan. However, Lin Yuan did not even make a move. They were pulled by the sky demon that had been resurrected from the nether realm's black water, and forcefully dragged into the bottomless black water. Then, there were 2 more sky demon bodies that had been resurrected. Such a strange situation kept happening. Even the palace master's face gradually lost its composure. He glanced gloomily at Lin Yuan. He did not care about saying any harsh words. He just waved his sleeve, and the ship showed signs of retreating. No one was willing to fight a battle that they did not have any hope of winning. The dozen or so Heaven's Strength Realm Heavenly Gates experts were almost exhausted from fighting, but Lin Yuan still looked calm and composed as if he did not use any strength at all. In reality, this was indeed the case. After all, the Nether Realm's black water was taken from a corner of the Netherworld River. It originally flowed endlessly. The lonely souls and wild ghosts in the Netherworld River were also constantly suffering. Lin Yuan did not need to use demonic power to activate it. He only needed to activate his innate skill and then watch the show. Of course, there was no invincible innate skill in the world. After this period of observation, Lin Yuan had already discovered that the Nether Realm's black water controlled things. If one stood on the Nether Realm's black water, they would be able to explode with the strongest combat power. The further away they were from the Nether Realm's black water, the weaker their combat power would be. If they were more than 500 meters away, they would even collapse on their own and be reborn in the Nether Realm's black water. Once the Nether Realm's black water was activated, it would not move again unless Lin Yuan deactivated his innate skill and then activated it again after half an hour of long guidance. Otherwise, once the enemy left the attack range of the Nether Realm's black water, Lin Yuan could only watch helplessly. Chapter 544. Lin Yuan understood that the son of a wealthy family should not sit in a dangerous situation. Although he was confident in his own combat strength, there were more than 3,000 sky demon cultivators in the Heaven Dipper realm around the palace master. Without the Nether Realm's black water to fight against the sky demon, Lin Yuan felt that he would be sending himself to death if he rushed forward. Therefore, Lin Yuan could only stare at the palace master and the others who were trying to escape. But soon, 2 slender figures descended from the sky, one on the left and one on the right, blocking the escape route of the Jade Lake Immortal Palace's ship. On the left was a handsome young man with pale skin and a red robe wrapped around his body. His temperament was slightly gloomy. On the right was Kong Lezin, who had long black and white hair and was dressed neither fish nor fowl. The 2 Kongming realm cultivators crossed their arms in front of their chests and coldly glanced at the Jade Lake Immortal Palace's huge ship. The red-clothed youth on the left was still holding a head that was dripping with blood. He casually threw it, and the head whizzed through the air and heavily smashed into a ship that was trying to retreat. Boom! There was a loud noise. The ship, which was dozens of meters high, was smashed into pieces by a small head. Kong Lezin tilted his head and stared at the ship in the middle of the fleet with ridicule. He said coldly, "You Sky Demon clan really don't put us in your eyes. You openly built the Jade Lake Immortal Palace in the south of the Shenwu Imperial Kingdom, and gave us the elixir of immortality for free. Now you want to get out of this situation of being a turtle in a jar and drag the Shuangjian dynasty down with you." Speaking of this, Kong Lezin narrowed his eyes slightly and his killing intent soared. He roared, "Do you think we are dead?" In front of him was the unfathomable Lin Yuan, and behind him were 2 members of the top forces. Judging from the situation on the field at this moment, the palace master seemed to have nowhere to retreat. He had no other choice but to fight to the death. However, there was no trace of panic on the palace lord's face. He merely raised his hands calmly and muttered something. Strangely, he did not make a single sound. In an instant, the clear sky above the Wei River darkened. Countless black clouds appeared, and under the layers, the sky darkened. However, those black clouds exuded an ominous aura. They were not the kind of dark clouds that indicated rain, but more like a word Lin Yuan had read in a novel in his previous life. Demonic aura. All of a sudden, Lin Yuan seemed to see a scarlet eye slowly open high up in the sky, staring at him mercilessly. Suddenly, countless thoughts appeared in Lin Yuan's mind. Most of them were that he had become a demonic beast and could never become a human again. The grievances of his previous life were the matters of his previous life, and he would never have the chance to take revenge. Also, he was essentially an outsider. No matter what he did or how long he stayed in the Tianwu continent, He was incompatible with this world. These negative thoughts kept breeding in Lin Yuan's mind, disillusioned and breeding again. It was as if Lin Yuan had to deny all his efforts and bow to the tragic fate in the future. Indistinctly, Lin Yuan even had the thought of dying. Ding! Negative spirit invasion detected. Host, please calm down and visualize the star chart to resist the opponent's negative spirit. The system's voice suddenly sounded in Lin Yuan's mind. Like a sudden clap of thunder, Lin Yuan was instantly liberated from his negative emotions. Ever since Lin Yuan did not follow the path it had planned and successfully activated the incense power model, the system had been silent for a long time. Although all the functional membranes could still be used, it had not given Lin Yuan any new skills or system models for a long time. In fact, it had been in a standby state for a long time. Unless Lin Yuan took the initiative to call the system, and it had to be a topic related to the activation of the incense power model, otherwise, the system would be unbound to Lin Yuan and watch him fend for himself. But now, it seemed that the system's thoughts were different from what Lin Yuan had expected. Because when Lin Yuan's heart was in despair, the system once again displayed its power and awakened Lin Yuan's mind that was gradually being controlled. It also told Lin Yuan how to resist the opponent. Lin Yuan was slightly stunned, but he quickly began to visualize the star chart that he had obtained from the war treasury. His heterochromatic eyes kept flickering with a strange luster as if countless stars were flickering in his eyes. At the same time, Lin Yuan also felt a strong and violent force rushing into his body and directly confronting the negative spirit. Then, he began to fight head-on. The two spiritual forces in Lin Yuan's mind were like two unbeatable armies fighting. Even though Lin Yuan's spiritual body did not participate in this battle, his mind, which was the battlefield, was aching faintly. He even felt a splitting headache, as if his head was going to explode in the next second. The strong and violent force was the power of the stars. After all, Lin Yuan was a highly educated person, so he knew very well what the nature of the stars, which were believed to be inhabited by immortals, was. They were not as gentle and beautiful as they were on Earth. In the universe, there were stars expanding, exploding, and even deviating from their trajectories to collide with other stars and be destroyed. These seemingly beautiful things were essentially bombs that could explode at any time. What frightened Lin Yuan the most was the negative spirit that had controlled him. Although the power of the stars was not the real power of the stars, the star chart produced by the system was not bad. However, the opponent was able to resist the power of the stars in the star chart with only one spiritual force. This kind of terrifying power was extremely terrifying. What kind of existence could resist the power of the stars with its own strength? And it was clear that Lin Yuan was not the only one who was affected by the negative spirit. The Black Water Army warriors, Kong Lezin, and the blood-red clothed young man, who were closer to him, all had painful expressions on their faces. However, the Sky Demon did not take the opportunity to attack. Instead, they knelt on the ground devoutly as if they were worshipping a god, worshipping the 9 heavens that were shrouded in layers of dark clouds. At this moment, Lin Yuan suddenly heard the sound of Buddhist chanting. Balls of golden light kept falling from the sky. The Sky Demon that came into contact with the golden light quickly smiled like snow under the scorching sun. The Black Water Army warriors that were shrouded in the golden light quickly regained their composure. Their bodies swayed. Then they fell into a deep sleep. Lin Yuan, on the other hand, could clearly feel that the third spiritual force had begun to pour into his sea of consciousness. Chapter 545. The third spiritual power appeared in Lin Yuan's sea of consciousness. It was not as violent as the star power, nor was it as violent as the negative spiritual power. Instead, it shone on Lin Yuan's sea of consciousness like the midday sun, constantly repairing his injuries. When the negative spirits came into contact with the golden light, they quickly melted like snow. In just a short moment, more than half of the negative spirits that were unable to be defeated by the star force had been eliminated. Woo! Hua! How dare you ruin my business? A vigorous voice exploded from the 9th heaven, as if a god was angry. A moment later, a gentle voice slowly sounded, with a feeling like a spring breeze. It chuckled and said, I am a monk, so naturally, I am merciful. What do you mean by bad things? Do I need your permission to save people? The voice from the 9th heaven sounded again, and it sneered. It seems that you have really recovered from your injuries. 200 years ago when you saw me, You did not have the confidence to speak like this. 200 years ago? 200 years ago, you were just an insignificant minion. Wu Hua's voice was still gentle, but it carried a touch of killing intent. Get lost. You are just a divine thought that I can crush at any time. Don't come to the Tianwu continent and make a fool of yourself. Do you really think that we can't kill you? Humph. The voice above the ninth heaven snorted coldly and said indifferently, if you really have the ability to kill me, I would have died 200 years ago. How can I be qualified to fight with you, Monk Wu Hua? The owner of the negative spiritual power obviously had an old grudge with Wu Hua, who called himself a monk. However, Lin Yuan did not understand that the existence from the ninth heaven who had a connection with the sky demon obviously had a strong background. How could such a powerful person hide from the guardians of the Elysium and swagger into the Tianwu continent? Even after he took action, the top experts of the Tianwu continent could only react. If the system hadn't suddenly acted and awakened Lin Yuan from that negative state, the consequences would have been unimaginable. After all, Lin Yuan's soul was still essentially that of an earthling. He was incompatible with the world of demon beasts, and was similarly incompatible with the human world of this feudal imperial system. He did not have the slightest sense of belonging in this world, so his resistance to the negative spirits was even worse than the soldiers of the Blackwater Army. Because he did not have the slightest sense of belonging to the Sky Martial continent, everything he did was just to return to Earth for revenge. If even this obsession was dispelled, Lin Yuan would completely become a ghost with nowhere to go, and then disappear from the world. Wang. A clear sound rang out. A shocking sword intent rose from the south. Wu Hua's voice sounded again, and he sneered, then I'll cut off your divine sense today. When I have time, I'll find your real body to fight. Let's see if you can still talk as arrogantly as you did today. As soon as his voice fell, the sword intent soared into the sky, and the dark clouds above the 9 heavens dissipated. The two actually disappeared one after the other. After losing the suppression of the negative spirit, everyone on the battlefield gradually woke up. Other than those unlucky fellows who had died or fainted, no one, not even the demon beasts, hesitated. All of them charged towards the members of the Jade Lake Immortal Palace and started a vengeful massacre. After all, because of the negative spirit that was summoned by these demon beasts, they had truly walked through the gates of hell. Among them, the red-clothed youth and Kong Lezin recovered the fastest. The two of them, one on the left and one on the right, unleashed all kinds of terrifying aura chi, and forcibly displayed the momentum of thousands of soldiers and horses. With the strength of the two of them, they swept through the 3,000 Heaven Dipper Realm Sky Demon, sinking all the ships on the field one by one. Their momentum instantly covered the entire battlefield. If a late-stage mortal evolution state cultivator used all his means, he might be able to kill an airborne realm cultivator. However, even if a late-stage airborne realm cultivator had thousands of means, he would not be able to win against a Heaven Dipper realm cultivator. The so-called half-step Heaven Dipper realm cultivator could be said to be completely vulnerable in front of a true Heaven Dipper realm cultivator. The gap between the realms would be greater at the later stages. At this moment, unless Lin Yuan used all his trump cards, he would not dare to easily say that he could fight someone above his level. Therefore, the 3,000 Heaven Dipper realm cultivators were the same as ordinary people in the eyes of the Kongming realm and the red-clothed youth, who were above the Kongming realm. They were all ants that could be crushed with a single move. After the end of the battle, Lin Yuan met up with the two of them with a dignified look in his eyes. More than 800,000 Sky Demon died in this battle. Whether it was the Sky Demon Legion summoned by Lei Qiuxing or the inferior Sky Demon absorbed by the Jade Lake Divine Palace, almost all of them died in this battle. However, after the battle, the Palace Lord of the Jade Lake Divine Palace used some unknown means to escape under their noses. I'll go after him. The young man in red raised his eyebrows and said in an indifferent tone. Then, his figure disappeared from Lin Yuan's sight. Kong Lezin shrugged his shoulders helplessly. He cupped his hands towards Lin Yuan and said in a deep voice, I don't know what the strange races outside the Heaven Gate ate wrong medicine. They attacked the Sky Martial continent on a large scale. Although we barely withstood these attacks, we also suffered heavy losses. In order to ensure that the Heaven Gate did not make any mistakes, we gathered many experts scattered all over the Sky Martial continent to help. We neglected the supervision of these Sky Demon. That's not good news. Lin Yuan's words did not have any intention of ridicule or ridicule. His multicolored eyes flashed with worry. The Sky Demon clan was not a powerful force among the strange races on the other side of the Heaven Gate. However, as invisible beings, they could easily pass through the supervision of the Heaven Gate guards and invade the Sky Martial continent. They could cause trouble behind the backs of these top forces, but they never dared to make too big of a move. This time, the Sky Demon publicly gave away the elixir of immortality, established the Jade Lake Immortal Palace, and even colluded with the Xinwu dynasty, one of the 7 great empires. This kind of behavior could be described as courting death. However, the strange races on the other side of the Heaven Gate cooperated with the Sky Demon army of the Xinwu dynasty. There was a Sky Demon who was strong enough to fight against a top expert, who took advantage of this opportunity to sneak into the Sky Martial continent. All kinds of signs seemed to indicate that the existence on the other side of the Heaven Gate had made a big move on the Sky Martial continent recently. But something was wrong. These Sky Demons' actions are no different from courting death. They seem to want to. The worry in Lin Yuan's eyes became more and more intense. They want to attract all our attention to the Xinwu dynasty. Kong Lezin suddenly raised his head. The worry in his eyes was not much weaker than Lin Yuan's. After pondering for a moment, Kong Lezin seemed to have just thought of something. His expression changed several times. He cupped his hands and said, "Dragon King, I still have important matters to attend to. I won't stay on the northern frontier for long." Chapter 546. Lin Yuan let out a long sigh of relief after the matter was settled. The Jade Lake Immortal Palace had almost fooled him. After all, the Xinwu dynasty was separated from the northern frontier by the Wei River. As the only large river in the Central Plains, the Wei River wasn't completely within the Xinwu dynasty's territory. If one walked further north, the source of the Wei River wasn't far from the Frost Mirror grassland. It was considered a fertile grassland. However, due to the Xinwu dynasty's covetous eyes, the smaller tribes didn't dare to settle down in this grassland. The larger tribes didn't like this grassland that was far from the Frost Mirror Palace and had to face the Xinwu dynasty's army. Therefore, the Xinwu dynasty used this grassland as a border garrison and built a pass to stop the Frost Mirror cavalry from raiding. If one were to head downstream, most of the Wei River was still within the territory of the Qingjiang Empire. As the strongest of the 7 great empires, the Qingjiang Empire's military might not even be comparable to the northern region, let alone the other 6 great empires. However, the Qingjiang Empire's terrain was special. The Qingjiang Empire was surrounded by 2 great rivers, creating a natural barrier. Regardless of whether it was the divine martial heavy steppes or the Frost Mirror cavalry, they would not be able to cross the great rivers to attack them. Therefore, when Lin Yuan learned that the Jade Lake Immortal Palace was going to use the elixir of immortality to control the Shuangjian dynasty, his first reaction was that they would choose the safer land route to the Frost Mirror grassland instead of the Wei River, which was currently controlled by the northern frontier. Lin Yuan didn't even know how many aquatic monsters were lurking in the Wei River. Furthermore, the Starfall Army and the Southern Expedition were both at the border. Even the ships of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce had to be strictly inspected, let alone the fleet of the Xinwu dynasty. However, the reality was just that dramatic. What was wrong with the Jade Lake Immortal Palace's master? She actually used the safe land route as a distraction and brought her main force along the water route in an attempt to deceive the enemy. If it weren't for the fact that Lin Yuan had the territory model and reminded the Jade Lake Immortal Palace's fleet to pass by the Wei River, Lin Yuan would have found the decoy they had set up before. Although it wasn't purely a distraction, the team was carrying the elixir of immortality. If they could reach the Frost Grassland safely and meet the Frost Khan, they would still be able to achieve their goal. But now that the top forces had intervened, Lin Yuan didn't have any worries at all. When these big shots decided to be ruthless, they were more than 100 times more brutal than a demonic beast like him. At this moment, a group of light cavalry galloped over. The leading knight slowly took off the golden helmet on his face and bowed slightly to Lin Yuan. Lin Yuan's gaze paused on the knight for a moment, and his eyes flashed with surprise. This group of knights wearing golden armor wasn't the army of the Xinwu dynasty, but the personal guards of the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion. The leading knight was a top student from the Northern Frontier Military Academy. Although he couldn't be compared to those monsters in the Star General class, in terms of strength, he could be considered the ceiling of this batch of students. 31 years old. Heaven Dipper Realm Level 4. In the future, this knight named Chen Huai might be able to become a champion like Gao Buzhen. However, according to Lin Yuan's deployment, Chen Huai should not leave Li Zhong's side. At least before Li Zhong had enough strength to protect himself, he had to be Li Zhong's personal bodyguard. To be more realistic, Lin Yuan's establishment of the Northern Frontier Academy gave many people the hope of success and recognition. Although these students were grateful to Lin Yuan, their own ambitions were not small. Chen Huai was willing to be Li Zhong's bodyguard, and he was taking a huge risk. After all, if anything happened to Li Zhong, even if he died, it wouldn't be too much. However, the reason why Chen Huai was willing to accept this task was more for the sake of his own future. In terms of combat strength, he was the best among the students in the same batch, but in terms of strategy, he was not just a little bit inferior. If he wanted to lead an army or directly enter the battlefield, his future achievements would not be too high. Therefore, if he could befriend the higher-ups of the Northern Frontier, it could at least guarantee that he would not be eliminated in the Northern Frontier because of his own shortcomings. Therefore, for Chen Huai to appear here at this moment, there must be something extremely urgent. Otherwise, he would not joke about his life and future. Just like what Lei Qiuxing said, Lin Yuan could not die. His future potential was limitless, and he was someone that the top forces wanted to curry favor with. Under this condition, Lin Yuan was still a balance point. The Hengduan Mountains and the Dragon Palace of the Four Seas were related to him. If Lin Yuan were to mysteriously die in an assassination, the consequences were definitely not something that the Shenwu dynasty could bear. However, Lin Yuan could not be touched, but it did not mean that Lin Yuan's confidants could not be touched. Especially Li Zhong, who was the think tank and the face of the organization. He had long been a thorn in Lei Qiuxing's side. If it were not for the embroidered uniform guards and the demon emperor, Li Zhong's grave might have grass as tall as an adult. What is it? Lin Yuan sized up Chen Huai for a while, then directly opened his mouth and rushed to the main topic. The system had been pretending to be dead, so it had not issued a mission for a long time. In addition, the reward for this mission was a high-grade lottery chance. Whether it was skills or items, they were all rare things. If his luck was to explode and he was able to draw a system template, it would be of great help to Lin Yuan's future growth. Therefore, Lin Yuan did not count on that red-clothed youth from the beginning. He wanted to kill that missing palace lord himself. Therefore, he did not have much time to waste here. The king of the Northern Frontier asked this subordinate to quickly come and see the Dragon King. Chen Huai dismounted from his horse, then took out a small white porcelain bottle from his bosom. After gently removing the cork, he poured out a silver-white metal ball and said in a deep voice, "This is the immortal medicine of the Jade Lake Immortal Palace. It was discovered when the Northern Army was eliminating the black market." When talking about the black market, Chen Huai's tone was heavy. Although Lin Yuan had set up a black market that guaranteed the identity of the buyer and seller, there were still some transactions that could not be exposed. Although those things were not to the extent that Lin Yuan feared the immortal medicine, the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion would still not allow it to circulate. However, the aristocratic families and even some of the higher-ups in the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion would not let go of this fat piece of meat. Therefore, there were many unofficial black markets that traded things that were explicitly prohibited by the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion. The people who operated these black markets all had very big backgrounds. Naturally, there were many fugitives under them. Therefore, Zhang Qilin and his Northern Frontier Army's main opponent had always been these unofficial black markets. Although the results were remarkable, their losses were not small. Immortal medicine? Lin Yuan's eyes flashed with a cold light. Even his voice was much lower. Yes, this subordinate can confirm it. Moreover, this subordinate has confirmed it with the higher-ups of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce and the members of the Blackwater Army who returned first. Chen Huai nodded in confirmation. Chapter 547. How great was the temptation of immortality! The Jade Lake Immortal Palace had only appeared for a short period of time, but it had already gathered hundreds of thousands of cultivators. Its might was obvious. Looking at the entire Sky Martial continent, the number of cultivators was actually not many. It was only about 1% of the population. After all, the old saying of, "the poor study while the rich study martial arts" was not false. Nurturing a cultivator was not difficult, but nurturing a powerful cultivator was too difficult. Not only did it require an outrageous amount of talent, it also required a large amount of resources. Ordinary people simply did not have the qualifications to cultivate. Lin Yuan controlled the entire northern frontier. The trade routes connected to the 7 great empires, and even the Dragon Palace of the 4 Seas had transactions with the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. In addition, he had nationalized all the land in the northern frontier. Although the tone did not change, the benefits were not small. Under such an environment, the Northern Frontier Academy had only nurtured less than 100,000 cultivators. In terms of resources, they were already stretched to the limit. If not for the fact that these students had to be assigned to various positions in the Northern Frontier after graduation to earn a living, or directly leave the Northern Frontier to make a living, the Northern Frontier Academy might not have recruited a second batch of students. After all, the Northern Frontier's ability to support was only so big. It was impossible to support everyone unconditionally. Even the rich and powerful Northern Frontier was like this, let alone other places. And among these cultivators, 80% of them cultivated for power and wealth. There was also a portion that wanted to protect their inheritance or for the illusory immortality. Those who truly sought the great Tao and transcended were less than 1 in a million. At least, Lin Yuan only knew of one person, Incubus. A single pill could directly skip the long and boring journey of cultivation, allowing the user to become an immortal. This kind of temptation was not something ordinary people could resist. This was especially true for those who had already achieved success and fame. They could live off of their achievements for the rest of their lives. At this point, wealth and power were no longer attractive to them. However, immortality could achieve this. Even cultivators were like this, let alone ordinary people and members of aristocratic families. Therefore, the fact that his resistance to the elixir of immortality was almost non-existent was also something that Lin Yuan and Li Zhong had expected. However, Lin Yuan wasn't completely defenseless. The reason the army stopped the river and interrogated the fleet was to prevent the elixir of immortality from flowing into the northern frontier. However, even the palace master of the Jade Lake Immortal Palace was stopped, but they couldn't stop the elixir of immortality. There was no need for Li Zhong to explain how big the problem was. Lin Yuan felt a chill in his heart. Have you found out who's behind this? Lin Yuan suppressed the killing intent in his heart, but his eyes were still filled with coldness. Chen Huai shrunk his neck under Lin Yuan's gaze, but he still shook his head and said in a deep voice, I'm not sure who exactly it is, but most of the aristocratic families in the northern frontier are definitely involved. Moreover, some of the higher-ups in the northern frontier probably won't be able to escape, and there's also the Demon Emperor Society and the Embroidered Uniform Guard. Chen Huai didn't say anything definite, but there was still a lot of information in it. The temptation of immortality wasn't something those aristocratic family heads could resist. Even if they were scared out of their wits by Lin Yuan couldn't make them give up their pursuit of immortality, right? After all, the elixir of immortality was bought by them with real money. Whether they sold it to others or used it themselves, it was their freedom. In addition to the protection of the illegal black market and the cover-up of some of the higher-ups in the northern frontier, they couldn't stop themselves from courting death. After they consumed the elixir of immortality, it would be even more impossible for them to control themselves. Because at that time, they would already be on the same boat as the Sky Demon. Chen Huai said that most of it was already very tactful. Even if Lin Yuan killed 10 aristocratic family members for this matter, at least 8 of them were not wronged. Got it, I will deal with it. Let Luo Su, Sherdong, and Li Zhong wait in the northern frontier's prince's mansion. This king will be back soon. I hope that they can give this king a reasonable explanation at that time. Lin Yuan nodded at Chen Huai, but he didn't have any intention of making things difficult for him. After all, Chen Huai was just a messenger. There was no need for him to bear the responsibility for Li Zhong's negligence. Yes. Chen Huai cupped his fists towards Lin Yuan, then mounted his horse again and galloped towards Shunning City. After watching Chen Huai leave, Lin Yuan opened his Eye of God to search for clues left behind by the palace master. At the same time, he secretly pondered about who exactly was protecting them from behind when the elixir of immortality flowed into the northern frontier. Among them, the biggest suspect was undoubtedly Sherdong. The embroidered uniform guards were currently overloaded. Not to mention protecting them, they couldn't even spare any manpower to carry out their duties. However, at this moment, the members of the embroidered uniform guards were scattered in the north. It would be a lie to say that they didn't know anything about the elixir of immortality. However, Luo Su and his subordinates didn't take any action at all. It was obvious that they were plotting something behind the scenes. It was unlikely that Li Zhong would do such a thing. After interacting with Lin Yuan for a long time, he knew what the elixir of immortality was. It was impossible for him to allow it to flow into the northern frontier. Unless, Li Zhong also wanted to use this matter to scheme against someone. As for Sherdong and the Association of the Demon Emperor, the problem was too big. Although the Association of the Demon Emperor also participated in the battle, as a civilian organization, the Association of the Demon Emperor didn't have the authority of the embroidered uniform guards. There was no space for the Association of the Demon Emperor to place people in the government offices and the various troops in the northern frontier. Most of them were still operating in the northern frontier, cooperating with Zhang Xiu's old subordinates to supervise the northern frontier and ensure that there were no slip-ups in the northern frontier. Therefore, only a fool would believe that the Association of the Demon Emperor didn't know anything about the elixir of immortality. However, to say that it was Sherdong who did it was a little unreasonable. Firstly, Sherdong's chances of winning were higher than Luo Su's. After all, the government offices couldn't operate without the Association of the Demon Emperor. Most of the information came from the Association of the Demon Emperor. The black market was under the supervision of the Association of the Demon Emperor. Even the members of the embroidered uniform guards and Yi Bus Ho were members of the Association of the Demon Emperor in name. If they had to compete with the embroidered uniform guards, then Sherdong had the highest chance of winning. Although the circulation of the elixir of immortality in the northern frontier was covered up well, it couldn't be said to be a secret. Lin Yuan would find out sooner or later, and he would lock his eyes on the Association of the Demon Emperor. At this juncture, doing such a thing was no different from self-destruction. With Sherdong's nature of seeking stability, it was unlikely that he did it. However, Sherdong didn't do anything like Luo Su, as if he didn't know anything about it. That didn't make sense either. Suddenly, without any conclusive evidence, Lin Yuan didn't know who to pin the blame on. He couldn't even make sense of many logical problems, making the whole thing very suspicious. Chapter 548. Under the scan of the Eye of God, Lin Yuan couldn't find the whereabouts of the palace master. But soon, Lin Yuan felt relieved. The voice in the ninth heaven was obviously not easy to deal with. Otherwise, it wouldn't have alarmed a big shot in the south. Since the palace master could summon a big shot of this level, it was reasonable that he had some incredible means. So after a short consideration, Lin Yuan decisively gave up the idea of continuing to search for the palace master. The Jade Lake Divine Palace's approach was very strange. They almost directly told the top forces about their existence. They even introduced things like the elixir of immortality to increase the number of their companions. At the same time, they were provoking all the top forces. This method of self-destruction was obviously to attract the attention of the top forces to the south of the Shenwu dynasty, and to cover up their other actions. So even if the palace master escaped, it was unlikely that he would return to the Jade Lake Divine Palace. He had already completed part of his mission. So at this juncture, a smart person would choose a place that wasn't the most dangerous but was definitely unexpected. For example, the northern frontier. Lin Yuan hadn't thought of this before, and the direction of the red-clothed youth was also the Shenwu dynasty. But now, the elixir of immortality was inexplicably circulating in the northern frontier. This made Lin Yuan realize that his internal situation wasn't as impregnable as he had imagined. Even among the higher-ups of the northern frontier, there were probably many inferior sky demon who had taken the elixir of immortality. But after knowing this, Lin Yuan had no way to deal with it. Whether it was aristocratic families, officials, or even those ordinary people who had been implicated, it was possible that they had taken the elixir of immortality. But to become a sky demon, one didn't have to give up their physical body. Their immortality was only on the spiritual level. When their physical body decayed, they could transform into spiritual existences and find a new physical body. They could gradually nibble away at the original spiritual body to obtain a new physical body. Just like how there was no knowing what was in a person's heart, no one could see through someone's disguise at a glance unless that person's acting skills were too bad. Lin Yuan was the same. He couldn't possibly kill everyone in the northern frontier just to get rid of Sky Demon, who had snuck into his team, right? However, this problem had to be dealt with, and it had to be dealt with before the end of the mission time limit. Otherwise, if the palace master was given enough time, who knew where he would escape to? Thinking of this, Lin Yuan snorted coldly and rushed to Shunning City. Meanwhile, Lei Qiuxing was wearing a dragon robe and sitting in the throne room, staring coldly at all the civil and military officials. Although he was collaborating with Sky Demon, the ambitious Lei Qiuxing naturally looked down on the Sky Demon's method of immortality. The pride in his bones wouldn't allow him to be a dog for Sky Demon. However, just because Lei Qiuxing thought so, it didn't mean that his subordinates thought so too. Although he didn't know the exact list, Lei Qiuxing was sure that nearly 90% of the civil and military officials in the court had already taken the so-called elixir of immortality and become immortals with immortality. Before today's morning court session, Lei Qiuxing had never realized that the civil and military officials under him were so united. Even a few princes who had the potential to ascend the throne had given up on their previous open and covert struggles. They stood neatly in the hall and spoke in unison on some political issues. It was as if they were a harmonious family of brothers. The bloody aura from before that was just short of drawing their swords and killing each other was completely gone. As an outstanding ruler, Lei Qiuxing understood some things the moment the Jade Lake Immortal Palace was exposed. For example, he had been played by Sky Demon from the beginning. All the support and plans were fabricated by Sky Demon to stimulate his ambition. He had to admit that the reason he was able to defeat the 10,000 Swords dynasty, which had been passed down for many years, was because of Sky Demon. However, he also realized that from the moment his ambition was stimulated by Sky Demon, he had become a chess piece on the chessboard. And now, he had become an abandoned chess piece. Was the Jade Lake Immortal Palace's existence to increase the number of Sky Demon and enslave more cultivators to fight for them? Of course not. This was a complete provocation to all the top forces on the Tianwu continent. When those powerful people were free, even if the Xinwu dynasty and the Jade Lake Immortal Palace were combined, they wouldn't be able to defeat them with just one hand. It was laughable that he had been working for others for so many years. This sentence was the truest portrayal of Lei Qiuxing's heart, because he knew that he was finished. On the other hand, Sky Demon's plan to attract the attention of those people to the Xinwu dynasty had already succeeded. Sky Demon wouldn't die. He would only be sealed. However, Lei Qiuxing would die. His Lei clan's descendants would die. Even the side branches wouldn't have a chance to survive. I said, send out the entire army to fight the Frost Barbarians. Did you not hear me? Lei Qiuxing patted the dragon table in front of him and shouted with a gloomy expression. Although he was sure that the imperial court had been controlled by Sky Demon, Lei Qiuxing still wanted to do his last bit. No matter how much he had been bewitched by his own ambitions, after knowing the inevitable outcome, Lei Qiuxing did not forget that he was a part of the Sky Martial continent. He was the sworn enemy of the foreign races on the other side of the Heaven Gate. The stronger the Tianwu continent was, the weaker the foreign races' chances of success would be. Therefore, Lei Qiuxing didn't care about the overall situation anymore. He just wanted to mobilize the troops under his command to fight the Frost Barbarians who kept invading the Central Plains and the South. It would be best if he could beat them until they returned to the Frost Barbarians to recuperate. He didn't want them to be sacrificed in his plan and be buried together with him, a sinner. The crown prince, who had the highest prestige among the princes, took a step forward expressionlessly and said in a deep voice, "Father, this matter concerns the inheritance of the Xinwu dynasty. We can't be soft-hearted. Father, please retract your order. Divine Emperor, please retract your order." As soon as the crown prince finished speaking, all the civil and military officials in the imperial court knelt down. The few who were still standing had ashen faces. They looked even worse than Lei Qiuxing, who was sitting on the dragon throne. As the nobles of the Xinwu dynasty, they were naturally tempted by the elixir of immortality. However, they chose to reject it due to various concerns. They didn't know the side effects of the elixir of immortality before. But now they knew. The price they had to pay was to lose their autonomy and become someone's lackey. Although these princes and civil and military officials were not as divided as those in the northern region, over the past few decades, who among them did not have any grudges against each other? Who did not have any friendship with each other? There were not many things that could make them disobey Lei Qiuxing without hesitation. At the very least, this matter before their eyes was definitely not one of them. 5 chapters. 5 consecutive days. Chapter 549. The army of the Shenwu dynasty had always been under the control of Lei Qiusheng. Aristocratic families and nobles always had the right to speak in the army. However, people like Lei Qiuming and Yan Xingqi were in the minority. Once something happened to the Shenwu dynasty, the entire army would only listen to Lei Qiusheng's orders. Even if their family members had high military ranks, it would be useless. This was because in the past 100 years, there were many emperors who were better than Lei Qiusheng in terms of governance. However, there weren't many who could surpass him in terms of martial arts. In the eyes of the soldiers, Lei Qiusheng was the one and only god of war. Especially after Lei Qiuming was conferred the title of King Qingpeng and Yan Xingqi was exiled to the northern frontier, Lei Qiusheng became the #1 person in the army. Therefore, in the Shenwu dynasty, going against Lei Qiusheng was a decision that required courage. This was because if one went against Lei Qiusheng and was caught in the act, one's entire family would be exterminated. Without the support of the army, Lei Qiusheng could kill whoever he wanted. What made Lei Qiusheng afraid was the combined power of all the aristocratic families and sects, not just a single family. The princes of the Shenwu dynasty fought fiercely, and there were many powerful people behind them. However, they only fought to be the most outstanding among the princes and become the successor of the dynasty. No one was naive enough to think that they could challenge Lei Qiusheng's authority. Therefore, at this moment, the crown prince who spoke out and the nobles who knelt on the ground weren't humans anymore. They were dogs. Dogs that were controlled by others. To put it bluntly, they were able to stand among the hundreds of officials in the imperial court of the Shenwu dynasty. They were all existences that could make a region of the Shenwu dynasty tremble with a stomp of their feet. Other than Lei Qiusheng who controlled the army, no one could make them obediently submit to him. Even to Lei Qiusheng, they were subjects and not dogs. Because of this slight mistake, so many people who were at the same level as them became like this. When they thought about how they were almost tempted, how could they look good? Since when did I need your permission to do things? Lei Qiusheng stood up from the dragon throne and looked at the civil and military officials below. He sneered, "A bunch of useless people who can't even maintain their selves. To think that I thought that you were all outstanding people and that with your help, the Shenwu dynasty would last for thousands of years to come. But now, it seems that although the rise of the northern frontier was a bit early, it wasn't an accident." With Lei Qiusheng's great talent and bold vision, even those ambitious people wouldn't choose to make a move when Lei Qiusheng was still alive. Therefore, the northern frontier grew from a remote corner that was regarded as a land of exile to a powerful enemy that shook Lei Qiusheng's rule. In Lei Qiusheng's view, this was undoubtedly reasonable and unexpected. However, after the trial of the elixir of immortality, Lei Qiusheng could only silently accept this fact. No matter how vigorous and carefree the civil and military officials of the imperial court were when they followed him, decades of indulgence had eliminated their ambitions. Now these powerful officials only wanted to live forever so that they could sit high above and continue to enjoy the glory, splendor, and wealth that ordinary people didn't even dare to dream of. There was no dynasty in the world that couldn't be destroyed, not to mention that the current higher-ups of the Shenwu dynasty had already been corrupted into a group of riceworms. They could only lie on their books of merit and wait for death. They used their methods to go against their colleagues, against the emperor, and to seek benefits for themselves. Relying on such useless people to govern this great dynasty was no different from slow suicide. As soon as he finished speaking, the civil and military officials of the imperial court and the several princes' expressions became ugly. After all, although the elixir of immortality was a free gift from the Jade Lake Immortal Palace, its essence was still incomparably precious. The Sky Demon could corrupt the civil and military officials of the imperial court and make these high and mighty dignitaries act according to his will, but he couldn't corrupt the entire army of the Shenwu dynasty. Even if he could corrupt some of the generals, it was useless because Lei Qiusheng's imperial edict was much more useful than the generals' exhortations. This move of bypassing the officials and directly commanding the army was equivalent to directly commanding the generals. The crown prince, who was still far away from Lei Qiusheng, said coldly, "Lei Qiusheng, don't forget that you are jackals of the same tribe as us. Even if you want to abandon the dark side and join the light side now, they won't let you go. If you act according to our plan, you will have a chance to live." The crown prince's face was distorted. He didn't look like the crown prince of a country, but more like an evil spirit that had crawled out of hell. Even his voice became hoarse and unpleasant, like the sound of fingernails rubbing against glass, which made people frown unconsciously. However, the Crown Prince's behavior made those dignitaries who had rejected the elixir of immortality even more certain that after taking the elixir of immortality, even if it didn't show anything on the surface, it was equivalent to losing oneself in essence. This was because the tone and voice of this Crown Prince didn't sound like the Crown Prince who was usually praised as a benevolent ruler. At first glance, it was obvious that the creator of the elixir of immortality was using the Crown Prince's mouth to speak. Now that things have come to this, you still want to use words to affect my mind? Do you really think that I am a 3-year-old child? I have already ordered the 3 armies to go out to battle. If the Frost Mirror cavalry doesn't retreat, the army won't retreat. Furthermore, I have also explained what the elixir of immortality is and the current situation of the imperial court. I have strictly ordered them to pretend that they didn't see it even if I changed my mind. Lei Qiusheng placed his hands behind his back, and his aura was unparalleled. He laughed loudly and said, "Even if you all give me the elixir of immortality now, it will be useless. Even if I am going to die, I will drag all of you down with me." At the same time, Lei Qiusheng's aura rose again and again, from the initial stage of the Heaven Star Border Realm to the advanced stage of the Heaven Star Border Realm. It didn't even seem like it was going to stop. It continued to advance toward the Void Realm, as if the bottleneck didn't exist at all. The Crown Prince still looked at Lei Qiusheng with a ferocious expression. After a while, he opened his mouth and sneered, "I understand now. You are not Lei Qiusheng at all. You are the shadow by his side. You speak so righteously, but in the face of death, didn't he still choose to run away? However, this is also good. After I kill you and capture Lei Qiusheng, the Imperial Edict will naturally be fake." Cultivation wasn't something that could be achieved overnight. Even if one used heavenly treasures to greatly increase one's cultivation, it was still the same. Some bottlenecks couldn't be overcome, and forcefully consuming spiritual items or pills to increase one's cultivation would only cause one's body to explode. Therefore, Lei Qiusheng, who was in the Heaven Star Border Realm, couldn't become a Void Realm expert in the blink of an eye. Therefore, there was only one explanation for the current situation. Chapter 550. 8 hours later. In the meeting room of the Northern Frontier Prince's mansion. Lin Yuan's cold gaze slowly swept across the faces of the 3 people. He said in a cold tone, "So, where is the explanation this king wants?" Luo Su shrugged. No expression could be seen on his bandaged face, but there was an obvious smile in his voice. "Dragon King, in order to participate in the war against Shenwu and Frost Mirror, the embroidered uniform guards even used handymen to clean. If you ask me, I really have nothing to say, because there are no other documents on my desk except for battlefield intelligence, military movements, and the behavior of the generals." Luo Su didn't hide his gloating at all. Although the embroidered uniform guard didn't completely remove themselves from this matter, because of the special circumstances, the embroidered uniform guard didn't have extra manpower to use elsewhere. In addition, the embroidered uniform guard targeted the officials of the northern frontier. Their monitoring of the aristocratic families and civilians was naturally not as strong as the association of the Demon Emperor. If Sherdong didn't have anything to say, then Luo Su naturally had nothing to say. Sherdong looked at Luo Su expressionlessly. His lips moved, but he didn't say a word. After all, the civilians of the northern frontier were the foundation of the association of the Demon Emperor. Whether it was civilians or aristocratic families, they were all under the supervision of the association of the Demon Emperor. Even those non-official black markets shouldn't exist. But Sherdong sat in this position and didn't do anything. Even if they didn't pursue the matter of the elixir of immortality circulating in the northern frontier, he would still be labeled as incompetent. Therefore, whether the elixir of immortality was pursued or not, Sherdong wouldn't be able to stay in the position of vice president of the association of the Demon Emperor for long. Especially the intelligence agency under him. Even if he didn't dissolve it, he would have to hand it over to someone else to manage. The moment Lin Yuan showed his blade, he had already become the loser. Although his mind was spinning wildly, Sherdong really couldn't think of any words that could reduce his guilt, let alone exonerate him. Li Zhong expressionlessly picked up the tea leaves floating on the surface of the tea with the lid and said indifferently, "You can't say that. The elixir of immortality is something produced in the Yaoqi Immortal Palace in the south of the Shenwu dynasty. It can't grow wings and fly to the northern frontier, can it? They are secretly circulating in the northern frontier, and the association of the Demon Emperor is indeed responsible for that. However, there are more than one or two elixirs of immortality. The Northern Battlefront Army has found at least 3,000 elixirs of immortality, and that is not including the ones we didn't find and the ones that were consumed. When he said this, Li Zhong took a sip of the steaming hot tea and said coldly, "If such a large amount of immortality medicine is flowing into the northern frontier, are the embroidered uniform guards' intelligence network in the north all blind?" Luo Su was choked by Li Zhong's words, and his face suddenly turned ugly. He originally thought that Shi Dong would be the first to make trouble for him. According to his understanding of this old enemy, even if he couldn't get away with it, Shi Dong would choose to die together with him. Even before this, Luo Su had already prepared a plan and didn't take Shi Dong seriously at all. However, he didn't expect that when Shi Dong didn't say anything and looked as if he had accepted his fate, Li Zhong would jump out and start a war. King of the Northern Frontier, it's easy for you to say that. Right now, the situation in the north is very complicated. Let's not talk about the Frost Mirror Cavalry and Xin Lin Jun's reserves for now. Let's talk about our internal problems. The southern expedition is entrenched in Donglin City. Once Li Zhongxing makes a move, our northern defense line will collapse instantly. The Frost Mirror Cavalry will march straight in. Not only the north can't withstand it, but the northern frontier can't even escape. There's also the Fallen Star Army's Gao Buzhan. Although I don't see anything wrong with him for now, as an old general of the Xinwu dynasty, he is a hidden danger that we must guard against. The entire defense of the Wei River is in Gao Buzhan's charge. Once something goes wrong, the Xinwu dynasty will retaliate with a punch. With the current strength of our northern frontier, we won't be able to withstand it. There's also the southern army stationed in the northern frontier. General Zhang Qilin used to be Shen Lin Jun's reserves. His loyalty to Lei Qiuxing is definitely higher than our northern frontier prince's mansion. Once Zhang Qilin has evil intentions and stabs us in the back, all the supply routes will be cut off by him. At that time, the troops sent out will all starve to death on the northern battlefield. Also, the transmission of every piece of information is very difficult. It can't be compared with peacetime. In the past, we only needed 2 channels, one in the open and one in the dark, to deliver the information on time and safely. However, on the battlefield, a piece of information may not reach you safely even if we send out 7 or 8 teams with the help of flying demonic beasts. Luo Su's face darkened. He squinted and said, "The manpower of the genie guard is limited. I'm not a genius. I really can't spare people to do other things." Li Zhong coldly glanced at Luo Su, then snorted coldly and continued to drink his tea. Luo Su stood up and knelt down in the hall. He faced Lin Yuan and said in a deep voice, "I've failed the Dragon King's trust. Although I'm not the main person responsible for the elixir of immortality, I can't absolve myself from the blame. Please punish me, Dragon King." Shi Dong's fingers tapped rhythmically on the back of the chair. He said in a strange tone, "Yes, you're indeed not the main person responsible. If the genie guard had fulfilled their duty, the elixir of immortality wouldn't have entered the northern frontier, and it wouldn't have been traded under my nose. So I'm the main person responsible, right?" Luo Su glared at Shi Dong with a murderous look. The elixir of immortality trade took place on the northern frontier, so Shi Dong couldn't escape the blame no matter what. But then again, if the genie guard hadn't chosen to be perfunctory, how could such a large amount of the elixir of immortality be transported to the northern frontier? It's still the same sentence. The elixir of immortality couldn't have grown wings and flown in. Luo Su spoke with difficulty, but it was the duty of the embroidered uniform guards, and the investigation of the people entering and leaving the north was also the duty of the embroidered uniform guards. A few light words would not be able to cover it up. Shi Dong's meaning was very clear. If they had to die, then everyone would die together. Lin Yuan didn't remain silent like he had in the previous meetings. Instead, after the 3 of them had finished speaking, Lin Yuan said faintly, "This king wants an explanation, not, who will bear this responsibility." As his voice fell, the 3 of them became serious, and their eyes gradually turned cold. If they really wanted to talk about responsibility, none of them could escape. And the explanation Lin Yuan wanted obviously wasn't as simple as someone paying with their life. What he wanted was a feasible method to find the sky demon hidden in the northern frontier and destroy the elixir of immortality. Li Zhong and Luo Su both looked at Sherdong's face at the same time. After all, it wasn't important what they said, but the intelligence work inside the northern frontier still depended on Sherdong and his Demon Emperor Association. Chapter 551. Sherdong took out a small white porcelain bottle and poured out a metal pill. He said coldly, "Although the Association of the Demon Emperor didn't nip this matter in the bud, please don't treat us as incompetent people. When the elixir of immortality gradually spread in the northern frontier, I personally led people to follow up on this matter." When he mentioned incompetent people, Sherdong's tone was obviously heavier, and his gaze fell on Luo Su's face. The elixir of immortality matter indeed had nothing to do with him. When this forbidden item that Lin Yuan and Li Zhong had repeatedly ordered to be excluded from the northern frontier appeared in the northern frontier, Sherdong felt his heart turn cold. In a trance, he even saw his own death. However, Sherdong had taken over the intelligence work of the Association of the Demon Emperor for a long time after all. He wouldn't neglect his work because of his emotions. Therefore, after a short period of shock and fear, Sherdong quickly began to investigate this matter. However, the more he investigated, the more Sherdong feared the mastermind behind the elixir of immortality circulation in the northern frontier. This was because the other party had unknowingly created a terrifying protective umbrella. No matter how Sherdong investigated and collected evidence, he only caught some Tom, Dick, and Harry. These people who were secretly arrested by the Association of the Demon Emperor didn't even know about the whole plan. They were just second-hand sellers of the elixir of immortality. Even the person who supplied them behind the scenes was an unsolved mystery. However, in this short period of investigation, Sherdong had completely understood how terrifying the other party's power was. Not only did the local government obstruct the Association of the Demon Emperor's actions, the underground forces that had previously submitted to the Association of the Demon Emperor attacked the investigators at all costs. After a few days of confrontation, the total number of deaths from both sides had exceeded 4,000. And this didn't include those who had to withdraw from this big show due to injuries. What made Sherdong's heart palpitate the most was that as his investigation deepened, he even noticed that a large number of members within the Association of the Demon Emperor were involved in the distribution of the elixir of immortality. This was because whether it was the progress of the investigation or the traces of his own group, they seemed to have been in the hands of the other party. This had nothing to do with their abilities. It only proved that the other party had pawns within the Association of the Demon Emperor, and their position was not low. He didn't know how many members of the Association of the Demon Emperor had taken the elixir of immortality, nor did he know how many of those who didn't take the elixir of immortality but were working with the mastermind behind the elixir of immortality purely for profit. There were fewer and fewer people who were worthy of Sherdong's trust, and the frequency of confrontations between the two sides was getting lower and lower. Meanwhile, the circulation of the elixir of immortality was also getting more and more frequent. It was no longer a private transaction within a small circle. It had even appeared openly in some unofficial black markets. Zhang Qilin and his men had only obtained a very small batch of the elixir of immortality after wiping out the black markets. Sherdong had seized and destroyed even more of it. However, the Association of the Demon Emperor was still huge and powerful, but the spies that Sherdong could mobilize were getting fewer and fewer. From an open confrontation between the two sides, Sherdong's men could only follow far behind those traders, counting the list of trades and who was involved. At present, Sherdong had a list of names in his hands. Although he wasn't sure how many people on the list had taken the elixir of immortality, he was sure that at least 9 out of 10 people on the list had not been wronged. Of course, there might be some innocent people on the list who had been implicated. Although they were quite suspicious, they had never participated in the trade of the elixir of immortality. They had only been in frequent contact with those who bought and sold the elixir of immortality. There were still more participants who hadn't been investigated. This was certain. Therefore, Sherdong had been busy with this matter during this period of time. He didn't dare to slack off at all. To put it bluntly, such a big thing had happened at the northern frontier. As the president of the Association of the Demon Emperor who was responsible for intelligence and spies, he couldn't absolve himself from the blame. But if he did it well and gave Lin Yuan an explanation, even if he had to die, it would be him. If he didn't do it well, he would just sit around in the office and wait for death, or degrade himself to wallow in the mire with the other party. If that happened, Sherdong wouldn't be the only one who would die. Therefore, before the elixir of immortality was circulated in the world, it had always been in the form of private transactions. Each transaction might only have 3 to 5 elixirs of immortality. But during the period when President Shi was fighting with the other party and was crushed by the other party, the trading range of the elixir of immortality began to gradually expand. There were even cases where a batch of elixirs of immortality had reached the scale of thousands of elixirs of immortality. Li Zhong's eyes flickered, as if he was thinking about something. He murmured, "But if that's the case, President Shi, why did you choose to face those traders directly, and didn't inform the Wang residents of the northern frontier first?" Li Zhong's voice was somewhat meaningful, as if he really didn't understand Shi Dong's actions, but also seemed to be hinting at something. Shi Dong smiled helplessly and said, "Wang residents of the northern frontier, it's not that I want to measure the heart of a gentleman with my own yardstick, but the elixir of immortality is too strange. Not to mention informing the Wang residents of the northern frontier, I didn't even reveal any information to the higher-ups of the Association of the Demon Emperor. Because before the answer is revealed, no one knows who is loyal to the northern frontier." Speaking of this, the bitter smile on Shi Dong's face deepened, and he continued, "From the very beginning, when the suppression by force failed, I knew that this wasn't a problem that could be solved with weapons. I could only sneak in to investigate, make a list of as many people involved in this matter as possible, and wait for the Dragon King to deal with it. Since that's the case, involving a third party or a fourth party would only make things more complicated. The other party's protective umbrella didn't just play the role of protection. Whether it was the real confrontation with Shi Dong, or the elixir of immortality being sold directly to the black market from private transactions, although it didn't comply with the laws of the northern frontier, its influence was indeed getting bigger and bigger, and the scale of the sales was also getting bigger and bigger. But all of this, the only person who knew the truth was Shi Dong, who personally followed up and investigated. Whether it was Luo Su, who was the commander-in-chief of the embroidered uniform guards, or Li Zhong, who was in charge of Shunning City, they only knew that the elixir of immortality had appeared, but they didn't know that the elixir of immortality had been circulating in the northern frontier for a long time. This already explained a lot of problems. Nourishing things silently. The other party's way of selling the elixir of immortality in the northern frontier's market could be said to be the difference between heaven and earth, but there wasn't even the slightest bit of information in between. Either the seller of the elixir of immortality was extremely skilled, and used a special method to conceal the elixir of immortality, or the various government offices of the northern frontier had been completely infiltrated by the elixir of immortality. In other words, if the northern frontier was compared to a plant, then the northern frontier at this moment might have already rotted to the roots. Chapter 552. The northern frontier would be rotten to the core. From beginning to end, this matter was within the expectations of Li Zhong and Lin Yuan. The appearance of the elixir of immortality had only accelerated the process, causing everything to happen much earlier. Li Zhong's face was gloomy as he said hatefully, "If what President Shi said is true, then the biggest problem in the northern frontier right now is those aristocratic families. I said at the beginning that these guys are wolves that can't be tamed. No matter how badly they are beaten, as long as there is a chance, they will still choose to betray their masters. This is their nature, and it can't be changed at all." As a child of a poor family, Li Zhong had never had a good impression of the aristocratic families, especially in the series of actions against them. The one who had led the various suppression plans had always been Li Zhong, but Li Zhong was not satisfied with the behavior of the aristocratic families with their tails tucked between their legs. Because from the beginning, Li Zhong had never prepared a way for these aristocratic families to survive. However, there were obviously capable people in the northern frontier aristocratic families. At the beginning, they had resisted Lin Yuan's reforms, but later on, they had even taken the initiative to use their own power to solve some of the hidden dangers of the northern frontier's reforms. This had allowed some of the aristocratic families in the northern frontier to survive. Later on, under the instigation of Kong Lezin, the aristocratic families in the northern frontier openly rebelled. Li Zhong had thought that this was an opportunity to wipe out all the aristocratic families in one fell swoop, but at the last moment, some small and medium-sized aristocratic families had rebelled, taking the initiative to help the northern frontier army to wipe out the large aristocratic families that were stubbornly resisting. After that, they had paid a considerable price to preserve their family's inheritance. Now, with the elixir of immortality, anyone with a discerning eye would know that the aristocratic families in the northern frontier played a dishonorable role in this. First of all, with the status and position of those aristocratic families, Cultivation and strength were not enough to make them obsessed. Otherwise, they would not be aristocratic families, but sects that were even more extreme in terms of martial strength. What these aristocratic children were truly obsessed with was wealth and power. In a situation where they had both, they were willing to pay a high price in order to pursue the so-called immortality. Even those big shots from Lin Yuan's previous life, who could shake the entire continent with a stomp of their feet, couldn't escape from this. Even the royal family, who was the head of the various dynasties and generations of aristocratic families, were crazy about the existence of the elixir of immortality, because they hoped that they could live forever, to be able to control their own wealth and power forever. In his previous life, the elixir of immortality only existed in legends, yet it was sought after to such an extent. If the elixir of immortality really did appear in the sky martial continent, how could it not be coveted by the aristocratic families? If we investigate from the perspective of the aristocratic families, the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce, after being rebuked by Li Zhong Luo Su, who hadn't been able to catch his breath, returned to his work state at this moment, and said this with a solemn expression. The North was now a battlefield. Ordinary aristocratic families didn't have the ability to pass through the main roads guarded by the various armies in the north. Only the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce had the ability and confidence to do this, and only the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce could maintain trade with the Shenwu dynasty at this juncture. The elixir of immortality wasn't difficult to obtain. After all, the Jade Lake Immortal Palace had taken out a large amount of the elixir of immortality to give to the cultivators who relied on the Jade Lake Immortal Palace. In addition, the Jade Lake Immortal Palace also had the intention of pushing the elixir of immortality to the south. Therefore, the merchants of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce only had to express their intentions and they would immediately be received by the upper echelons of the Jade Lake Immortal Palace, and receive a large amount of free elixir of immortality. Regardless of whether these merchants of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce were still human after leaving the Jade Lake Immortal Palace, it wouldn't affect their thoughts of transporting the elixir of immortality back to the northern frontier to sell. This was because anyone with a little bit of business insight could see that the elixir of immortality was very profitable in the market. Only those kinds of pills that could ignore bottlenecks and increase cultivation, or those that could increase aptitude, could compete with the elixir of immortality. And it was very clear that the latter actually wasn't as competitive as the elixir of immortality. It was even a heaven-defying divine medicine that had a price but no market. Even if one had money, it was useless. If one couldn't buy it, one couldn't buy it. In terms of supply, it was far inferior to the elixir of immortality. Although Lin Yuan had repeatedly emphasized that the elixir of immortality wasn't allowed to appear in the northern frontier, it couldn't stop the merchant's nature of pursuing profits. At worst, if Lin Yuan really didn't allow it to be sold publicly, they could use their influence to make private transactions or directly sell it in those illegal black markets. Not only was it secretive and safe, but without the Northern Frontier Prince's Mansions Commission, the profits would be even higher. To be more realistic, the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce was no longer the small chamber of commerce that had to rely on Lin Yuan to survive in the early days of its establishment. Even if their trade routes were still in the hands of Lin Yuan, they had secretly contacted many powerful demonic beasts. Even if they had offended Lin Yuan, they still had trade routes to use in the Hengduan Mountains. It was just that it was no longer as safe, the cost of transportation was higher, and the time it took to transport goods was also longer. In other words, Lin Yuan was no longer the only partner of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. However, the existence of the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce at least supported nearly two-thirds of the capital expenditure of the northern frontier. Once the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce collapsed, at least 80% of the projects in the northern frontier would be stopped, and a large number of refugees would have nowhere to go. The wealth that Lin Yuan had seized from the north was all used to maintain the situation in the northern frontier. It was impossible to continue the construction of the Great Wall that had already been planned. This was a bloody fact, and it was also something that Lin Yuan and Li Zhong had to solve, but they couldn't do so for the time being. In the original plan, Lin Yuan had intended to use the method of boiling the frog in warm water to slowly eliminate the threat of the aristocratic families and the Northern Territory Chamber of Commerce. After all, the children of the aristocratic families were the absolute main force of the northern frontier's officials. Without these people, even Shunning City would be out of control, not to mention the remote local officials. It was even possible that a situation of feudal lords would rise up together. After all, training a qualified official was a long and arduous process. First, one had to learn theoretical knowledge in the Northern Frontier Academy. After passing the test, one would be assigned to various government offices to accumulate experience. Only after accumulating experience over time could one become a qualified official. It would take at least 3 to 5 years to train an official who could govern a place. This was also the time needed to change the blood of the northern frontier. On the other hand, the young generals of the Northern Frontier's military academy were a different matter. They had studied in the military academy for countless years, and their theoretical knowledge was unrivaled. Therefore, they only needed to learn the basic art of war and strategy, as well as some common code words of the Northern Frontier, and they could be sent to various troops to be polished. The real famous generals were all trained on the battlefield. No one had heard of any of them learning in the military academy. If there were such people, it would be due to their natural talent, and it wouldn't have much to do with the Northern Frontier Academy. Therefore, when it came to changing generals, Lin Yuan could be capricious. However, when it came to changing officials, Lin Yuan had to be patient. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.